The Power of the Doctor, Legend of the Sea Devils, Eve of the Daleks, War of the Sontarans, Nikola Tesla's Night of Terror, Spyfall Part 2, Spyfall Part 1, Demons of the Punjab, The Saranga Conundrum, Rosa, and The Woman Who Fell to Earth. What do they all have in common? Commentaries, audio commentaries, real-time insights, observations, and additions from the people actually behind whatever gets commentated on. Where better to gain new perspective into Doctor Who episodes? And trust me, there are some new perspectives and some surprises we all have in store for us with these commentaries. So just as we examined all sorts of paratextual material underpinning Yaz and the Doctor companion dynamic in our Tragedy of Yaz thing, here we will deepen our Doctor Who perspectives by examining the 11 audio commentaries of Chris Chibnall's era of Doctor Who. So doing that Doctor Who deepening today will be myself, Neo from Australia, along with my pals from England, Ingiga and Oliver. And what I've done is selected the cream of the crop, so to speak, of the commentaries, the most interesting bits for us to think over and talk over and analyse and pull bits out from, and really to discuss and examine in new ways. Unlike the Tragedy of Yaz, we will not be doing this so chronologically, and we won't be doing this in one mega long experience. We will have 5 discussions covering different groupings of Chibnall Era episodes with commentaries. Episodes will get grouped together based on common themes between them. What do you think groups these last 3 episodes we're going to be looking at today, guys?
Finality.
Finality, and the other big underpinning theme of this commentary discussion is actors acting, specifically the relationship between actors and the show, especially in contrast with the relationship viewers have with the show. Finality and actors' relationship with the show are the main 2 big ideas we'll be exploring in these 3 commentaries today. Finality will be our focus for Power of the Doctor, Legend of the Sea Devils, Eve of the Daleks. And then next we're going to move into controversy and representation and overstepping of lines and writing inspiration when we look at Spyfall Part 2. Then we're going to move into looking at authenticity and historicals and meaningful and personal history as we look at Tesla and demons. Then we'll move into ideology and authorship and writing worldviews with Rosa and Spyfall Part 1. And we will end with direction as we look at War of the Sontarans, the Bating episode, and The Woman Who Fell to Earth. Direction, multiple meanings there.
We're picking up on threads and ideas that sort of spark up across different commentaries, jumping from one to another.
But we're going to start most appropriately with the ending, with Finality. Do you guys know anything that's contained in these 3 commentaries for Jodie's last specials?
I know nothing, pretty much.
I know Mandip hadn't seen Power of the Doctor.
That's true.
This is our first sit down, which sounds like it's going to be fun.
Yes, so why don't we just dive in?
Hello, I'm Chris Chibnall. I'm the writer and executive producer of this episode of Doctor Who, Power of the Doctor. And with me for this DVD commentary, our last ever one together,
is Jodie Whittaker, who plays the Doctor, and Mandip Gill, who plays Yasmin Khan.
I'm applauding you both. That's the only crowd now. Mandip, you haven't seen this.
No.
So we're recording this like a month before it goes on TV, which is weird.
So my reactions will be real, so I guess a lot of screams. Mandip wasn't trusted to be sent the episode.
No. This whole bullet train sequence was supposed to be the whole of the Christmas, the New Year episode.
Was it?
Yeah. We were going to do a whole episode on it, and then we had to pull the whole episode and redo something else because the art department, we couldn't get the sets up in time. It was all a kind of, so
no way.
I'd always wanted to do a thing on a bullet train. This was going to be like the climax of that episode.
I would have loved that because I could have got to sit down in between takes.
It wouldn't have been all on their train.
I like doing Groundhog Day though, didn't you?
You've
never seen Groundhog Day?
I know what the saying is.
You know the repeat story, like time loop.
No, I don't.
Have you ever seen Groundhog Day?
Yeah, no, I get
it. But I love doing that because it just meant that we were in, when it was like, oh, do that scene and then do it again.
No.
Oh. It's because she had to do a lot of running in that one. You didn't like it.
I wish you weren't sat next to Jodie because every time she speaks, she hits me.
It's a little insight into your relationship.
I'm sorry, I'm just still speechless about the bullet train thing. My jaw was on the floor hearing that. Like, wow. An entire lost Chibnall episode just there in that sequence. What?
I was so glad you guys hadn't heard that before hearing it now. Yeah.
The fact that it was specifically because the art department didn't have time to get the sets up in time. I mean, I feel that's vindicating, isn't it? That's quite, that really gels with a lot of what...
That sets up one of our running threads, yes.
Yeah.
Not enough time.
Definitely. Wow. I wonder if it would have involved the Dan exit thing, or if that was just like...
We'll get into that.
Maybe, would that have made a bit more sense if that was linked into the hypothetical train episode, or... Dan
doesn't really have the Graham connection with trains.
Wasn't Graham's thing buses?
Oh yeah, but we met him on a train. Well, one of his first scenes was on a train.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah, we did.
That's what I think actually kind of worked out with doing the train stuff in the last episode. Is we have lovely circularity. The train was in The Woman Who Fell to Earth. It was a big thing there. That second clip of the power of the Doctor there connected into Eve a little bit, as Mandip described her less than ideal experiences filming that special. And also, I think even linking back to our entire tragedy of Yaz, there we have Jodie and Mandip's relationship, which will get touched on a lot more at the ending of Power of the Doctor as well. But true friendship there pervades everything they do together off screen, off episode, I suppose. So that's a long-running thread.
I mean, I feel faintly grateful that we got Eve of the Daleks, because not that I'm a huge fan of that episode or anything, but it just feels like compared to, oh, here's a train in space, I mean, it just feels maybe a bit more creative, the whole time loop thing. Yeah.
It's an actual episode. Yeah. One of those strange things, like we talk about with RTD sometimes, that the rushed episodes sometimes come together better than the one's long planned out. It's funny how that happens.
Did Mandip really not like Eve?
I think filming Eve would have been a huge headache. Like, the commentary for that, the director goes into a lot of, it was a pain to manage because because of the conceit of the episode, they kept having to reset so many times and keep the character chronology in their heads in different ways because of the loops and everything. I imagine it was a bit frustrating to film. And they're actors, so they're the ones filming it. Like, this is Mandip's first time seeing the episode. They film the episodes. They don't watch them like we do. So I kind of get her not being that into Eve. We're speaking like spurned Eve lovers who are resentful of her for not liking it.
It feels like the first time she's got something interesting to do in the role.
Oh, that part of Eve. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's like one scene though, isn't it?
That's true, one scene. And the rest is a lot of repeating dialogue, so I suppose.
Yeah.
But this was an episode we were never going to do. Do you remember, like, right back?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this came in late. We were doing Flux, we were doing 6 and then 2 specials, and that would be it.
And we were wrapping in, like, July.
Yeah, that's right. And then we got the call in, like, I can't remember, December, January, when we were doing Flux, when we just started filming 2 episodes in or something. Got the call from Charlotte Moore at the BBC, going, will you do one more for the centenary? And I think also because they probably wanted some time for the next team to get in and get ready. But I remember I had to call both of you and go, do you want to do it? We thought about it for a long time.
I was so busy, I had to really and out.
So they learned 2 episodes in a Flux that the BBC wanted 9 episodes overall for the final run, not 8, not Flux plus 2, but Flux plus 3. We knew that already. But there's a lot of stuff on these commentaries where there's confusion over it to this day. And so it's good to hear from, there's no mouth horseier than the showrunner themselves. And so there's a bit about how the 3rd special came into existence. Of course, that doesn't mean that the era was originally going to end on the Legend of the Sea Devils Beach, because that's not how things work. It just means the backdated specials kind of span into existence out of this, because like we heard so much of in the Power of the Doctor discussion, Chibnall had some of the Power of the Doctor ideas in his head forever. Significant beats like the triple threat of Sybes, Daleks and the Master and all that sort of thing. He
mentioned there that he thinks the extra episode was maybe to give some time for the next team to get ready, and assuming he sussed that out at the time, well, I don't know, maybe he didn't, but like there was a lot of talk about how when Chib made this episode, was he thinking that there was no next team and it was the end of the show, it was going to be the end forever, and he was writing this episode thinking it would be the last episode of Doctor Who, like, ever, because there's a lot of speculation about that, isn't there? And I've always been a bit sort of skeptical about that, because I've always just wondered, because, they commissioned the whole Regeneration episode from him, and like, would he have been able to maybe just surmise that even if he didn't know who it was, someone would presumably be in, on the conveyor belt to take it over on the BBC's secret list or whoever. So, and this maybe suggests that maybe he might have surmised that someone would take it over, even if he had no idea who.
Yeah, that kind of marries up the different interpretations, because we have him on the record of being, I didn't know until so many hours before RTD2's announcement that was happening, but that doesn't mean he doesn't think anyone's taking it over necessarily. Yeah. Strevens, I know, made a comment like that, but they are different men.
Yeah.
How do you come up with the titles of the episodes?
They're usually quite late. This one was the latest ever.
We know they're quite late because me and Mandip never get told them, obviously, and we never remember them in interviews, and we get so much crap for not knowing the name.
Saying Spider episode.
Oh, yeah.
I say Norwegian episode.
Yeah,
they take you away. Yeah, that one.
Yeah, Tim Shaw episode.
Tim Shaw.
It's I deliberately never put them on scripts because in case they leak.
They leak, yeah, but then obviously we only see it and it's like we're worst people ever at knowing our own stuff. So like, someone will say the name of an episode. I'm like, well, I didn't know it as that.
Yeah, well, you just admitted it now, so that's
that's
cute.
Yeah, and this, like, even the marketing people saying, what's it going to be called? Because we need to put something on the poster.
Well, another thread there of the actor relationship with the show is that it's the episode title isn't a big thing for them. They don't. What is a title to Jodie and Mandip, the actors, if they didn't know the title until long after they've done their work on it? I think that's completely fair. That from the fandom perspective, it might look like they're uncaring or unknowledgeable about the episode, but it's because the title manifests into existence later than their work on it. So I think that's completely fair.
Yeah.
What I don't find so fair is... Do you remember in 2015 with Series 9 how Moffat released this image with all the episode titles for Series 9 together, and we could see, they have that dual structure with all the two-parters or associated episodes.
Oh, I loved that.
One of my favourite Doctor Who moments.
It got us so excited, didn't it? Look at all the titles. And even earlier in like RTD1 era, episode titles just weren't this... Not all of them would be released at once like Series 9s all the time, but they weren't this very closely guarded secret. And why were they this closely guarded secret? I still don't understand why Chibnall did that.
I don't know. Why was he so scared of shit like the Battle of Ranskorav Kolos leaking? Spyfall. Oh no, what will happen?
I don't understand. It's not like it's Qui-Gon's Noble End type of titling, It's not Gallifrey's tragic demise. He has good titles, he has bad titles, but none of them necessitate this need for spoilerphobia, in my opinion anyway. I find it very strange to this day.
And he mentioned that this one was very late in the process. Like, maybe he's just taking ages to come up with them.
You'll see later in the commentary how he comes up with this title.
I can see the argument for something like Legend of the Sea Devils, which has content in the title.
And Resolution, I think, is the one, but it's not like this title was secretly Resolution of the Dalek. In fact, it's the other way around. The title is clever at concealing the Dalek, so why not have the title not be... a surprise.
Yeah, the fact that they were keeping the title back actually gave away that twist, so...
Yeah. It's just such an odd thing. It's endemic across Chibnall's career, I think. There's the infamous example with Broadchurch Series 1 where he was hiding the killer's identity because he was considering changing it if it had leaked out early enough, which is just... It's guarding spoilers, in air quotes, to the point of... It just confuses me, the whole approach to marrying the storytelling with,
It's so fucking ironic that he was so secretive about titles, but all his big plot developments basically leaked like months in advance. The Centenary plot leaked, the Timeless Children leaked, the Spyfall Master reveal leaked. It was just, he didn't actually succeed in keeping things secret.
And like you say, there's so little actually in the titles.
Yeah.
The power of the Doctor, what is the
Vanquishers?
They're as ambiguous as you can get.
And so here's John's departure scene. So again, when we were setting up for doing, because we were never supposed to do this many episodes, then when it came to do this one and put it in, it was like John had this massive tour booked and wasn't available
of course,
at all.
He couldn't do it,
And it was really...
we didn't even know, did we, if we could do even just a few days?
No, and it was like we really worked hard because we didn't really want to write him out at the end of the previous episode, of the Sea Devils episode, because it was about you. And actually, he just came back and did these sort of various days. So it was great to get him to do that, like pre-titles and this, and obviously then the scene at the end.
Again, that lines up with basically what we had figured out and picked up from elsewhere. That they just didn't have him contracted. But it's nice that he found a few days working around it to get himself a little exit.
Yeah, it was cool. And, you know, again, it's a case where the rushed thing kind of works maybe better than the stuff that's got lots of time to work. Because, you know, Dan's departure in this episode is clearly a lot more compassionate than Yaz's, I think, to put it one way.
Well, I think it works.
And I think it does lend the episode an air of finality that Dan leaves so early. It kind of, not foreboding necessarily, but it adds this weight to the episode, I think, that we see a companion leave at the start. It really does give me the this is the end feeling in the episode. I think it's one of the more successful beats of the episode. So it's that classic irony that the less prepared stuff or the constraints on your creativity often end up producing the better bits of storytelling.
Yeah, it's nice that Chib acknowledges when he's said there that Legend of the Sea Devils, I think, well, I assume he's addressing either, you know, Mandip or Jodie or both of them. He says it was about you.
Yeah.
So it's nice for him to acknowledge that the story was about something or any particular character.
And also, as much as John Bishop's quite charming in the role, I can only imagine he would have gotten in the way of a story like this.
There's already more companions,
Ace and Tegan and everyone else, nightmare.
And so, born out of production issues, you get a beat that really actually does its job.
The next clip is also about companions. Let's listen to that one.
Was there any time that you were gonna kill off any of the fam? Was there any time when you thought about doing it?
Both John and Brad said to me,
kill me.
Brad, who's back for like 3 days in this, is like, can I die? I was like, excuse me, it's all about the Doctor and Yaz going. He's like, can I come out? Will you kill me off? And John was like, will you kill me? I was like, no, because it would be so hard for the episode to recover from that.
To continue,
and what you're going through, and you know, so I understood it, but
babe.
He was very understanding about it.
I think that's a good storytelling instinct.
Yeah.
That's quite insightful.
It's another one of those funny actors have a different relationship to the stories than we do thing. The eagerness for the actors to be killed off. I think that's, well, some fans would certainly like that. There are some fans who have this kind of fixation on the idea of companions dying for various reasons. And I don't think it's that same instinct that leads John Bishop to think, oh, wouldn't it be fun to be killed off? But it is interesting that they have that kind of drive, some of the actors. What do you think's going on there?
Well, I think the difference with the fan stuff is it's a complete inversion that fans take it very, very seriously and want it to be serious and want people to die in it. And actors like John Bishop and Bradley Walsh have a bit of fun with it and think it would be funny to get killed off in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
And that second one's a much better reason to kill off a companion. But I agree with the decision not to do it here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of wish Chip had answered that question in a more wide-ranging way, because when she asked, did you ever feel like killing off any of the fam? I want to know if Chip ever considered killing off any of the other companions, like at any point, like Series 11, Series 12, was he ever thinking he'd ever do it? I mean, because I feel like he probably wasn't, but I'm still curious.
Yeah, I expected an answer more along the lines of, this isn't a bloodthirsty show, which is what Moffat says at some point.
It's ironic, given what he did to both Clara and Bill.
That's true.
I don't want to relitigate all the Yaz and Thasmin stuff discussed at length elsewhere, but Chibnall describing bits of these last 3 specials as all about the Doctor and Yaz, it's just weird to me, because it's like he has the correct instinct at the end there to be, oh, well, we should be focusing on these 2 at the end, but the choice to stave off so much of their development or the relationship and all that to the very end is another baffling choice, when he had this whole big canvas of 3 seasons in which he could have explored it with depth, but no. All about the Doctor and Yaz at the very end, when, Also, the Doctor gets benched for 24 minutes in this episode. She gets put in the void. It's another Chibnall instinct, yeah.
But this was always the aim for your final episode, to have like Daleks, Cybermen, and the Master, and to bring all that stuff together. It was always, I mean, we talked ages ago, didn't we? Like after the end of the second series, about Sacha coming back.
Yes.
Yeah. Again, it's a horsey mouth situation where it's something we've heard before, but it's always good to hear it confirmed in the lovely tones of the showrunner himself. So there was one of his big ideas that he had always in the bank for his final episode, the triple threat.
You get the impression that Sacha and Jodie enjoyed working together a lot the first time around.
Oh, yeah, we'll hear to that pretty soon. Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it makes complete sense for Sacha to come back for Jodie's finale, because he feels, even though he only appeared in the second series, he feels like, and didn't appear in the third series, he feels like a spine, like some sort of core element of her era, just in the sense that he was like an actual key story element, whereas series 11 and 13, I mean, are just sort of like a big blob.
Spineful.
Yeah.
The circularity of bringing Tim Shaw back in this episode, if they'd done that, it would have paled next to, like, Sacha's a real character with a real relationship with the Doctor, and they have real tensions and attractions and things. It's good storytelling instincts, isn't it? Chibnall resisted the urge just to do weird circularity, like bringing Carl back in Eve of the Daleks, like that type of thing. He brought back the character who should have been brought back at the end, Sacha. So he has some good instincts.
He just happened to throw in Cybermen and Daleks on top of that at the same time, just because he thought it would be really cool to have them all together at the same time.
The Cybermen and Daleks side-eyed each other while the Master was dancing. That's pretty unforgettable.
Yeah, and that wasn't in the script, to be fair. That was the director's edition, wasn't it? Yes.
No, that was the director, but still, that alchemy could only have come about from Chibnall's triple threat instinct. The next clip is also about Chibnall setting the foundations for something to be accomplished, even though he wasn't consciously thinking about it. Let's watch.
Kind of hadn't realised we'd done until I was watching it. It's like this whole unit storyline, which like in Doctor in, I don't know, 70s and 80s was mostly men, is suddenly like every character in unit here, every leading character in unit here is female. Like it's just like they've all become women in this, like this whole scene between all you guys. It's like the full kind of the 13th Doctor becoming a woman, then the whole impact of that then becomes...
Is he taking credit for that? Because I feel like the whole unit being all women thing was kind of already a thing, like in 2015, 7 years ago. So, well, either he describes it as a knock-on effect of 13 being there, and I don't think that's really justifiable, that at least. Regardless of whether Chib came up with the character of Kate in Power of Three or whatever.
Yeah, I don't want a hair split, but, like... every character in that situation, besides Yaz, predates 13. Like, Tegan, Ace, Kate, and what does he just mean, like the extras?
I mean, he says the leading characters. I'm not sure if he's talking about the extras. I don't even know who the extras are in this bit.
Like, I do actually think Chibnall has a good impulse with how we cast more women. Like, I agree with the spirit of what he's saying, just maybe not this particular example, but I agree with him in general that he cast more diversely than a lot of others. And
he diversified behind the camera a lot too, you know, which shouldn't be overlooked.
Very, very much. It's just it's not his best example for his actual admirable and, you know, good instinct there.
I think you can do a little bit of sleight of hand magic there, where the result of getting a basically all women story is actually coming out by the decision to focus more on the companions, which Power does.
Yeah.
And companions are mostly women.
Because then you get Graham showing up.
And then you get Graham. But writing out Dan at the beginning is, again, a sort of odd sleight of hand thing there. But there's not a clear continuity, but I think you can see that as the result of deciding to focus in the right place on the right elements of the story naturally makes it more focused on the female characters.
I think there is that kind of arc. One of the complaints I had frequently about Series 11 was you've seemed like you've centered women and that you've made the Doctor a woman now, but I feel like so much of the emotional center of the show is across not just men, but a type of man that I feel like the show has paid lots of attention to before, the very folksy, middle-aged kind of, you know, dad-like figure with Graham. But we come to the last episode of the era, and whether he originated it or not, it's mostly focused on women. Like, it's Ace and Tegan's subplots, it's Yaz's subplot, it's what the Doctor's doing. There's men in here, but I feel like he's not overcome by his urge to do dadly figures like he has in the past as the center of everything.
Although he still gives Graham a speech in Yaz's last scene, which...
He does. But like you said earlier, he realized Yaz and the Doctor should be the focus, more or less, of these last few episodes. So, that's your finality. He's changed his focus from Series 11. He's progressed in some interesting and good, to my mind, ways.
It's interesting to say that Unit is all women when only one of the characters in that scene is actually a unit person. The others are just sort of there.
But she is looking for some work. She's going to recruit them all.
0-hour contract with unit.
Yeah, they're standing in unit, so technically they're units. Okay, it counts.
They're in units, yeah.
But interesting that that he's still talking about it like that, even though which is a lot more. That's a lot more in mind of, like you said, Moffat's unit, which was explicitly all women each time. And so talking about unit being all women now is a bit odd.
Oh, I remember this thing.
I just remember thinking, thank God these are his lines.
Yeah.
I would never
I
in a
was really
million
blown
years
away by
learn
Sacha on this day.
a TED Talk.
I was really blown away by Sacha on this day.
He's really the only actor in the show who has that equivalent weight of lines that you get.
He always has more lines than me in episodes with Sacha. That's why I'm delighted when he's in episodes with me, because I know Sacha will talk more, and I've always got less lines in a scene with him, and it is just a dream.
You're the only actor though who'd go, oh, they've got loads more lines than me. I'm really pleased.
Particularly when at the end of season 2, where he's got me like trapped.
Yeah, he often has you trapped.
Yeah, but I was just like
monologuing,
half asleep. I was like, this is brilliant. Sacha's monologuing. I'm having a little stood up nap.
God.
There's a lot there.
They make it a lot of fun, but really quite sad that she likes when she doesn't have lines.
I love that she refers to the show like how the classic collection sets work it in America, that it's season 2 for her instead of series 12. I actually like that. I think that's charming.
I mean, it just makes sense. Like, it's the second season she filmed. I think it would be weird if she didn't, to be honest.
So Jodie's humility, I think, it can be read in positive and negative ways there. I think well, like Chibnall says, it's amazing to have a lead actor that isn't grabbing for the limelight, but is quite happy for another actor to take so much of the stage and take so many of the lines. That's charming.
I think the nature of the lines is maybe important here, because I mean, she talked before at some point about how, like, the big speech, 3-page speech, and it takes you away about the solid track was like a nightmare for her to film it. And I think the fact that she sounds so exhausted with the massive sort of info dumps and monologues that she gets, I feel like maybe that is more a symptom of what she's getting rather than necessarily like her particular idiosyncrasies as an actor.
I think whatever you think of the politics of it, if you're an actor and you open up the Zygon inversion and you have that big war speech, I don't think you're going to be shaking your head and going, oh, this is bullshit. I have to learn all these lines. I think you're probably going to be feeling quite enriched by the material you've got to work with there. But if you're reading The Timeless Children, then maybe... I mean, I know I'm threatening the orthodoxy here of, everything is always the same, and Peter Davison's era is the same as Jodie Whittaker's era because they were both blonde and a bit boring, and we all love the past showrunner when the next showrunner comes around. I know that's a huge, almost quasi-religious orthodoxy in the Doctor Who fandom, but it's complete and utter bullshit because scripts are actually different and writers are actually different, and the Zygon inversion is actually a very different script to The Timeless Children.
Yeah, it's all well and good for them to sort of have a laugh and talk about how great it was that Jodie was stood in the upright prison while Sacha went on and on and on. But we had to watch it. It wasn't that fun for us, it must be said.
Yes, I'm not rushing us to us now, but the thing we're about to watch that isn't from the commentary is actually about the Timeless Children scene. It's a clip. I've referenced it before. It's a clip of Sacha on a podcast talking about the experience of filming The Timeless Children. Because Jodie there, I feel like it's almost negatively framing it because she's so humble. Like, she's talking about, oh, it's great that he got to have so many lines and I'm happy. She's really kind of selling herself short on some of... Like, she's almost like saying it's great that Sacha gets all the work. And she's really, I think, selling herself short as an actor and a friend to Sacha in quite how all that works. So from his perspective, you'll see it's quite different. I'm not rushing you, though. If you've any thoughts on this clip before we go to Sacha, let's hear it.
I think the fact that she can reliably say, like, whenever Sacha shows up, he will have more lines. I think it's indicative of how Chibnall approaches writing, certainly the Master, like, as a character. The fact that he can be relied on to have just like the big textual sort of blobs, like just massive slabs of words, and the Doctor can be expected to sort of disappear into the background while he's doing these monologues. The fact that the weight of the text will shift onto the Master and the Doctor will be imprisoned or whatever. They even mention in this clip that he often has Jodie trapped somewhere. It's like, well, this keeps happening, and that just seems to be how Chib writes these characters.
I'm surprised, I suppose, that they're really cognizant of that that they're really aware every time Sacha turns up, it's putting the Doctor in a cage.
Like, I remember one time I had, in the script, there was this, like, huge monologue that I have. It's like, and when I time doing it, it's like 3 minutes. There's quite a lot of dialogue. But it was written as a voiceover. So I thought, oh, maybe do I have to learn this? And I remember asking production, and no one got back to me. But as I'm going to Cardiff to film, I get a call from the AD saying, oh, you know that voiceover? We're filming it tomorrow. I was like, oh. And I said, I asked if this is going to be a voiceover. And they went, oh, you'll be fine. The director said, you can just have your script by the side if you want. We can film a bit. And we might not even use all of it. And I said, well, I don't work like that. I need to. So I felt a bit of a diva. And I was like, I just can't. I'll try and do some of it. So I ring Jodie and I said, Jodie, am I being a bit of a diva here about not, knowing this? And she said, kind of leave it with me. But the fact that she answered my call, when she's got a kid as well, and she cares about my happiness, really meant a lot for starters. But basically, when we went on set that day, she made sure that scene was not filmed to allow me the time to do it.
Wow.
And I just had so much respect because she does, with the amount she's got going on, she doesn't have to do that, and it's that kind of stuff where I was just like, and people don't really know that a lot about, you can see what she delivers on screen, which is amazing. But
so there's the other side of the timeless children's filming from Sacha's perspective.
Yeah, I'd heard that clip before, but it still kind of just blows me away that happened and that Jodie had to kind of do that, and that they weren't getting back to him, and just, oh God, it's upsetting.
I also think you can tell that he's not that kind of actor, and it comes through in his performance that he's the kind of person who likes to properly learn lines and figure out a performance beforehand. And so, I don't know, maybe it's square peg, round hole with a production, with Sacha Dhawan, a production that just wants you to do it on the fly with your script to one side. But very good that Jodie leveraged enough weight to just not do it that next day. That's really great.
Yes, we really needed that clip here because I felt like she came up, because she's so humble and just funny. I think I didn't want it to sound like she was coming off badly in that last clip where she's like talking about making Sacha do all the work, because she's the opposite. She's just such a funny, humble person. But you see how she protected him there, which is just fantastic. You can see why they're close as well. And yeah, Sacha, I think he takes his performance very seriously. I think of all the Chibnall Era leads, he takes his performance super seriously, and it really shines through in moments like that.
Yeah, I think it's very hard for someone who gives a performance that committed in a production this evidently shambolic, where they're just winging it and they don't know what they're going to do. And, we'll fix it in the edit. I'll just have your script. We don't know if it'll be a voiceover, or we'll film it, we'll do this, we'll do that. And it's just, it's just a complete clusterfuck. Like an actor who actually needs to focus and think and put, their all into a performance deserves, I think, a bit better treatment than that.
This is when I come back to the different relationship we as viewers have with the show compared to the actors. It's so interesting to me that the timeless children could be an unpleasant experience on both sides for some different reasons, but also some of the same reasons. It's like the shambolic nature of the production came through in us getting a mess of an episode, but it also came through in impacting the actors in negative ways and, giving them a mess of a sleepless night or, confusion on the day of and all this stress. It's amazing how much being unplanned can spread across. And I know there's a lot to praise with Russell T Davies as a showrunner, certainly. But when you read the writer's tale and we get so inside his head, because it's his book, we get inside his head of what procrastinating and not getting scripts in on time is like. But I think it's so interesting to come around. Let's look at the actor angle of it, and you can see what a stress it is there. It's just interesting to see all these different refracted sides of a production, I think, between the writers, the actors, the viewers.
And the length and one-handedness of the monologue, the ambiguity of its location, and the fact that it's so, whether it could be voiceover or it could not be, that all impacts the viewer and the actors in the same way. It makes it very difficult to perform, and it makes it quite difficult to watch.
I think that comes across all sides of the actor-writer audience prism a lot of the time. The we'll fix it in post kind of mentality of, well, we don't know if it'll be a voiceover or what. We'll work it out as we go. I think that can come through in scripts that feel like first drafts or are first drafts, like the Battle of Ranskoor Avkolos, like Chibnall was on the record of that being a rushed first draft. I think you can feel that there's moments, I think, in the RTD first era and definitely the Moffat era where there's such a singular vision of what they're setting out to accomplish before they do it, that even if problems do arise as they're filming it or in post, the kind of singularity of the vision can kind of carry them through. Like, I know there's times where, you know, things were going wrong on the actual filming day, or so-and-so wasn't working, or so-and-so actor couldn't do that, and things gone wrong. But if there's a real clarity of vision, I think, about what you're making before you start making it, that can kind of coast you through a lot of things. If that's not there, like here how they're describing, then what do you do? Everyone's fretting around, because what vision are they actually telling in The Timeless Children? Or even in The Power of Doctor, some parts of it. What is the actual clarity of vision here? Who knows? That's why it has to be made up as long as it goes along.
I mean, for example, the Angels Take Manhattan is another first draft production.
Manhattan did have a few drafts, but 2012, obviously even busier year than usual for Moff, Series 7 and Sherlock and everything, and the upcoming Matt specials. And I agree the episode feels a little less super built through the way some other Moffat scripts do, although I don't think it feels Wedding of River Song level or anything, and I do like the episode a lot.
But because it's carrying through obvious themes that everyone on the production is keyed into, and it's using old ideas in new ways and stuff like that, you see how much of that episode can get by. I think it's very good anyway, but the actors all understand the relationships because it's the same themes and the same dramas that have been playing out across the era.
And they don't have to do any shit where they're concurrently talking to a Cyberman and also giving a mind telepathic monologue to the Doctor who's in the hula hoop.
There's so much two places at once nonsense.
I think scale is also a really directly related concept here, with something being rushed or kind of opaque with what its ideas are. If your scale is small, I think it's much easier to kind of make a shambolic thing work. Like RTD's Midnight was a pretty rushed replacement for another story that didn't end up happening. But Midnight isn't a script with a triple threat. It isn't a script with a huge amount of characters or a huge amount of locations. It's very pared down. And because of that, it can just focus on things that are known to work and are known to have easy depth to draw from. David Tennant's performance, the depth of the 10th Doctor's characterization, small kind of dramas, almost misanthropic dramas about the bad ways humans behave in a group. They're all things RTD can draw from at a well and do really well. And it all works together and it's basically in one location. So the fact it was so rushed, I actually think it ended up incredibly well because it wasn't trying to overextend itself. But not having scripts of like a Series 12 finale prepared enough in advance, or having a clarity of vision about that enough in advance, is a much bigger issue because there's such a scale to it that there's so much you need to be connecting with at once. And if it's not there, it's like how this commentary started with the bullet train thing. It affects everyone when things aren't happening on time or when there's not enough clarity to carry everyone through.
Slight sidebar, but as far as I can think, is Sacha the only actor who's like talked about wanting to do more with his performance? Because he talks a lot about it and in depth about the things he wants to do and the way his identity in the character comes through and the different angles he wants to put on the character in a way that I can't particularly think of anybody else doing.
Well, on this very Blu-ray itself, on the behind-the-scenes featurette of it, Sacha is still talking about, I don't think I've shown all I can do with this role. I think there are still many other layers I can unpeel here and that sort of thing. So he's banging that drum forevermore. And I guess maybe the Big Finish spin-off he's going to do will help him realize. I mean, I hope it helps him realize that. I hope he gets good scripts to do. He's a great actor. I have a huge amount of respect for him. I really like him. I think he takes his role really seriously, and that endears me to him.
I think if he is the only lead in this era who talks like that, I think it's probably to do with like the nature of the characters, because the Master, as he's written here, is so basically like chaotic and volatile and kind of swinging one way or the next and kind of like bubbling with sort of all kinds of different madness and stuff. Whereas the other lead characters in Chibhu, they don't have that fizziness to them, do they? Like maybe they might regress a lot like Yaz does, but they don't. I'd say they're fairly. You see them, you get an idea of who they are pretty quickly. Like they don't have some crazy unfolding puzzle box of layers to them.
Mandip definitely has a healthy respect for the character. Like we saw that in the Tragedy of Yaz stuff. There's a lot of times where she was pushing for things.
And I think also sort of on what Gig was saying, with an antagonistic character, you've got a lot more obscured from the audience.
Yeah.
And a lot of what Sacha talks about is how there's things we haven't seen yet and elements we don't understand, and that's the nature with an antagonist. They're off screen most of the time. And their character and internality isn't right at the centre, which means you can do more depth with the performance than you probably get to do with the lead characters.
Yeah.
Worth noting, actually, because we've talked about has anyone else talked like this, and even though Jodie hasn't exactly said the same thing, but she has talked that she wants to do more. She's always begging, bring me back. Let me do more. Bring me back on the show, RTD. Yeah. Yeah. So she clearly she does want to do more somehow in some form.
Oh, please bring her back.
But do you think there's a kind of tragedy about, like, we'll get a Doctor Who actor talking about, oh, there's more I wish I could do with the part, I could do this and I could do that, and the fandom puffs up a chest and they repeat those two words that we all know so well, big finish. In your box sets, you're going to get to do all that stuff, guys. It's such a... I know it's more with Joe Martin's character than anyone else, but it feels like such a confining thing to me to be like, I want to do more. Get in your bloody box sets. That's where we're going to send you.
Yeah. You can get that depth of character between these two scenes in Eve of the Daleks.
Yeah.
We're going to do 8 box sets of storytelling, exploring the gap between 2 episodes.
It's like a displacement thing, isn't it? It's like, Joe, don't rise above your station. You're going to get box sets for literally the rest of your life. That's where we can give you all your stuff. Forget about the telly. Forget about Chibnall.
And cons. You'll be able to play the character in photo shoots.
Yes, you can be in a comic with David Tennant every second issue. That can be your joy.
Yeah, you'll enjoy that, won't you? Being in a comic. It's good work for an actor.
I mean, I will listen to the Chibnall Era spin-offs, at least the first sets from everyone. Like, I am interested in what's going to happen there. But it's not what a screen actor wants to be on screen. And as a fan of, as much as, we all are huge fans of some audios, like, I don't want Joe Martin to flourish on audio. I want Joe Martin to flourish on screen as an actual doctor, because that's the greatness of her acting, is she could do that. I don't want it just to be good in, quite expensive box sets that have such a small audience. Remember, Billy Piper and Nicholas Briggs were in an interview thing together once, and they're talking about how much these sell, and Briggs throws out a figure like 2,000, and Billy Piper seems stunned, and I don't think she believed him. I thought he was joking or something at first.
What's tingling your molecules about Big Finish at the moment?
Well, I bet it's got that our version of the show has an afterlife, and that's going to make those fans so happy, hopefully.
It's made me happy.
Well, it's all people talk about at conventions to me. Are you doing it? So how many people do listen to it?
A few thousand, yeah.
It's got to be more than that.
No, it depends on the release. They vary quite drastically, but it can be sort of 2,000 or 3,000.
I feel like
10,000.
At least 10,000 people have asked me if I'm doing it. In America, does it need to be easier to get hold of?
Well, it's now they're available as downloads, so it should be easy for them.
It needs more promotion.
Okay, are you going to do that for me?
I'll do it the minute we leave.
Good, thank you.
But, that's the kind of scope we're talking about for these new Who spin-offs. And Joe Martin isn't Billy Piper, as much as I love The Fugitive Doctor. So think about, even taking piracy into account, think about the scope we're talking about here and how many people are going to get to hear these brave new realizations of The Fugitive Doctor or Sacha's Master or presumably Jodie and Mandip at some stage. It's so small that while I'm the type of person to listen to those audios and pay them a great amount of attention and, think about them in detail, it's not the same. It's no replacement for what they should have gotten on screen.
These spin-offs are not an era of the show, and they're not part of the legacy of the show. They are extruded content that most people will ignore. That's the truth of it.
Exactly.
Yes.
I'm not picking a fight with any of the lovely creatives at Big Finish, but there is, from an actor's point of view, there's a big rift there. Even though you get to put the actor's name on the box set, and they do record the lines, and a lot of actors put a lot into those audio performances. And this isn't about audio performances in general, but the industry model of Big Finish. But they are quickly recorded, hurried productions, usually reading from the script, often having not really looked at it much beforehand.
There's no Sacha thing of, oh, I've got to learn all this, because you don't. You're in a booth, no one can see you, you've got the script right in front of you. You could cold read it if you're good enough and you think you could get away with it.
And also, there's no sets, there's no costumes, there's no monsters, there's no effects. Like, where's all the fun? You just stood in a booth.
And again, audio is a brilliant medium, but an actor acts visually as well as auditorily. And these actors, especially transposed from TV over to audio, are visual actors who know the visual medium best. So, I mean, take the visual elements out of Sacha's performance and you're really handicapping that. Because there's so much going on visually in his performances.
I also think, to tie it back into Finality before we move on to the next clip, there's a difference with when an actor has performed a character and there's been a kind of finality with how that character was portrayed. Like, I think of Gareth David Lloyd does loads of tortured audios, and I'm a huge fan of him. I'm a huge fan of the tortured audios. I think most of them are really, really great. I think he works really well with the medium. I mean, he's a video game voice actor as well. He's totally into audio acting. Not everyone is, and not everyone has to be, all these screen actors, but he is. But for him, when I hear a Yanto audio, there's no like pang of regret to me, because Yanto, he got to realize a fully formed character across a full run of a TV show, and he got all you could want. He got loads to do on the show. He fully realized that character, and there was enough Yanto. I love Yanto. And, you know, more of him would have been great, but there was enough Yanto on TV. Jo Martin never had an episode to herself. You know, it's just a completely different ball game. When she's doing audios, there's always going to be that kind of pang of the McGann pang of, you know, even as McGann has, you know, decades worth of audios, we still kind of think, man, he should have gotten a TV run just because he never quite got it, did he? So I think there's a difference with some of the audio actors. I don't feel any like regret with some of them. If they got to realize the character enough on TV, then it's just like extra content. But with Jo, or you could argue Sacha, it's like, well, did they get to realize enough on TV? You know, it's great that you're still doing stuff, but this doesn't feel like an extra after a fully formed thing you got to achieve. This feels like I don't even know what to call it. It's like you didn't get enough, and then we're giving you this, which isn't really fitting into the whole. It's just, it's discomforting, I think.
Again, this isn't about audio specifically, but Big Finish is a not lesser, but it is a side piece medium. It only exists in reference and in shadow of the main thing, and telling actors that they get to go on this obscure, essentially, you know, straight to video. It's the same kind of thing. Yeah, I find it particularly gross as a way of telling actors, oh, don't worry, you get to keep playing the character. You get your own era. It's in box sets.
It's that disconnect again between the audience and the actors have a very different relationship with the show, and it's very clear there. And it's actually clear in our next clip if we're ready to move on to that.
I was just remembering we had a conversation where you were like, can I be with Mandip in every scene in the final episode, in the finale?
Because
we split
of
you up
COVID,
during Flux.
You'd had to split us up because obviously for a risk, if one of us got it, production shut down, whereas if we were separated.
Yeah.
But that really, really affected. It did. It affected. It was really hard on set, like not being in scenes with you. I really didn't like it. Oh, can you say something about not being in a scene with me? Please?
Yeah, it was really hard just hanging around with John and Jacob having like a proper
Your best
laugh.
mate, Kevin McNally.
Yeah, and then every now and then we'd remember this lady with blonde hair.
They're very sweet.
They are. That's interesting. So they're the two leads of the show, of course. So yeah, if they were together all the time and they got sick, like you'd have to do a resolution. You'd have to invent Mitch and Lynn again or something like that just to kind of carry the show.
Yeah, it's so ironic given Jodie really wanted to do every scene with Yaz, and then nonetheless in this episode the Doctor still gets benched. Although she's the AI hologram, isn't she? But would she have been on set for any of that?
Yes, they all the actors are very appreciative of the way the Chibnall Era did it. The hologram thing is on set with them. Like the Dalek in Power of the Doctor that's in the TARDIS, it's actually a real, it's the actual Dalek model in the TARDIS set. Yeah. And in Spyfall 2, when Sacha's doing that emotional performance with Jodie when he's revealing Gallifrey's destroyed, he's really there. It's just a hologramic kind of effect they put on there. So they are actually there. Yeah.
Okay, good. Still, nonetheless, there's still, I think Yaz still has to do like a bunch of stuff like without the Doctor, even though the hologram pops in now and then.
Yeah.
Right, so we shot these scenes, and this was a change of location.
Yeah, this was originally written to be on an oil rig. The whole story, this little sub-story with the Daleks attacking, was supposed to be on an oil rig, and they were attacking an oil rig and then drilling. And we got a location for an oil rig, and then it fell out at the last minute, and so Jamie had been on a recce to somewhere else, a big park, and underneath this kind of, it's like an adventure park, isn't it? Like dinosaurs and stuff.
In it.
Beautiful, isn't it? But freezing.
I should know the name of it, but I don't. But, so yeah, we changed it to volcanic lava underground,
it's nice
inside the volcano. It's much more Bondy.
On an oil rig feels like it would have been able to be about more. The Daleks taking over the world with fracking, I think, is more of an idea than this.
Yeah, it might have spared us all the... Would we have still got all the seismologist shit if they'd removed the volcano? Would that have still made sense?
I think so. There's something later in the commentary which we'll talk about, the seismology stuff. I think so. There was something that Chibnall really wanted to do.
Presumably they're just drilling. It would have been the same thing, but on an oil rig instead of in a volcano. Right, so still drilling, still earthquakes.
I imagine the oil rig version of the story would still have done that classic Chibnall trick of spectacularly just missing being about something. Like being so close and not quite landing there.
It almost certainly a big moment where the Doctor goes, "Oh, what have you done to the fracas? How dare you?"
And Chibnall gratified that it makes the episode more Bondy. Of course, the Bondiest episode of all is what our next commentary discussion on Spyfall 2 will get into. But any other oil thoughts for this clip, not in general?
In general. Interesting they filmed it in a very cold place. It's very hot. I assume it's just all CG lava.
There's the classic actor-audience difference, yeah.
This is great, though for me as a long-time Doctor Who fan, giving guns to Tegan and Ace and having them shooting Cybermen is like, there's a particular kind of jolt that gives you when you're writing that. And Cybermen attacking unit. Cybermen attacking unit with all that kind of stuff just feels like so lovely to do. And to do with this level of budget where you can do, like that shot has got so many extra Cybermen and duplicated.
When I read the scene where Ace and Tegan have to take out guns and shoot the Cybermen, I was thinking, yes, this is great.
I love the Cybermen. The Cybermen are one of my favourite monsters, and it was just a blast to work with them.
Before you get on your high horses and you start judging Chibnall's joy there, I wanted to spice it up a little by peppering in the actor perspectives. So Sophie and Janet like the Cybermen stuff. Why do you guys feel entitled to criticising what Chibnall did with the characters there if the actors are so into it?
I'm gonna be honest, I often find it, maybe I'm really like prejudiced and biased towards like classic Who like actors who haven't been on the show in like sort of decades and stuff, and sort of have a lot of distance from whatever they were doing, and also they were just playing companions in like 20-minute episodes of classic Who long ago. But I kind of find myself struggling to give a fuck about what they think about the characters, to be honest, a lot of the time. It's rude of me, but you know, also I noticed we didn't really get much of Janet Fielding's perspective there. We just got more of Sophie's, but to be honest, I just feel like, you know, I'm just sort of course it's fun to shoot Cybermen on set, like of course that's fun. You're not gonna, if you're doing that, you're not gonna have some higher minded like, you know, perspectives on what it means for the character of Tegan to be doing this. That's something for fans to preoccupy themselves with, like us. You know, that's something for us to get on our high horses about. You know, I don't think it's a thing to really be particularly judgy of the actors for, or really give much of a fuck about what they think.
What's Oliver's defense?
Well, I'm a big fan of the scene. No, I think like you say, not to denigrate classic Who, but were these richer, more substantial characters, I think actors would be able to draw that line and go, well, my character left because. If there was a clearer sense of that in this episode, certainly. If there was more resonance for how, say, Tegan left, or how how Ace left the Doctor in this episode. If it was more about those exits, then there'd be more awareness of why them grabbing guns and doing a big shootout bumps so oddly. I suppose this is also a case where Big Finish really obscures that difference, and they've done so much of this in the intervening 30 years that it's hard to get particularly upset. What Big Finish have done with Ace, do you remember that line in the 50th where the 10th and 11th Doctors are both trying to sonic that portally thing, and it's like they're both trying to reverse the polarity, and so they end up just confusing the polarity because they keep whipping it back and forth? That's what Big Finish do with Ace's characterization. Exactly.
The thing is, when it comes to Tegan, I think we cannot pretend that the 5th Doctor era had any sort of respect for character-driven stuff. Like when we think about the lack of reaction to Adric's death in the ensuing story, and just things like that. We can't give much credit at all. It's so inevitable.
But it had silent credits, Gig.
Silent credits,
yes. Oh,
the thing that ruffled my feathers most was the idea that this is very petty, but the idea that you would get a really big buzz from writing and then they grab guns and shoot at the Cybermen. As a writer, is that really what you're in this for? I don't know.
I mean, Chib has so much joy from the idea of the triple threat. I think that is just his mindset. The whole, hey, monsters, guns, shooty, bang, wee.
I think that's the long-running tension of Chibnall's era, is that he's a man who, honestly, is sometimes quite good at writing these kind of darker, more violent stories, as he's done in some other shows like Torchwood or Broadchurch or what have you. But he seems to have this belief Doctor Who has to be a certain type of way, a certain type of aspirational pillar of hope type of thing, and it kind of juts against itself a lot of the time, where he's putting in some of the more, I don't think he's misanthropic the way I think RTD sometimes is, but some of the more violent say what he urges in sometimes. But then he also has this, oh no, it has to be very positive and hopeful, and he kind of works against his own best instincts. Well, his own instincts, I think, sometimes. But for me, the actor thing is, this is by no means exclusive to Doctor Who's fandom, not at all. But I think there's this tendency to treat, we take a show as a religion and we treat actors as like the bishops. And so what Sophie says about Ace is ordained. And it's very, very important. And we need to shape all our thoughts on Ace around what Sophie says, because she's Sophie and she performed the part. And, this is the same with Janet and Tegan. And why are we doing that? They didn't write that. The episodes aren't improvised. The actors don't come up with what the characters say, 99% of the time. They're doing what the writers say. And the directors are colouring the tone of what the writers write. I know because they're on screen and they're the people inhabiting the characters. I understand this tendency, because it's all very visual, to kind of imbue this huge sense of meaning to all the actors' thoughts ever. But they're actors. They don't write the lines. They don't, there's exceptions. Like, I know we talked about on our Empty Child discussion gig with how much John Barrowman contributed to the formation of Jack as a character. But I think he's one of the exceptions outside of the general rule, which is that the writer tends to be the one writing the character more than the actor.
I think it's because fans want they want some sort of authority, right? And when you have these classic Who characters where the original writers of the Cartmel era and the people who did the novels and stuff, and Ian Briggs who created Ace, and these people have all gone their separate ways. They've all filtered off into the mists of time. Whereas the actor, thanks to Big Finish and stuff, and Collins, they're still very present. The actor is their only big figure who you can look to and be like, okay, this is definitive of who Ace is. Whereas with other TV shows, I'm sure with, say, Better Call Saul or something, if you ask Bob Odenkirk or someone about their character, and it's well, of course they're going to be able to tell you, be an authority, because they've been so deeply interwoven with the progression of the show or whatever. Whereas I think with classic Who and stuff, the actors are often the only figurehead, leading any sort of, I guess, representation for that character. So the attention goes to them as the sort of figurehead. But often as a result, any sort of creative intent or nuance about that character gets lost.
That's interesting. I think New Who has foregrounded the showrunner role to such a huge degree, and I love this. This is when people talk about splitting up the showrunner role in New Who, I quiver with fear. This is my singular favorite thing about the new iteration of the show, is how much we've centralized both the creativity and the production into one person. I think it makes such an interesting type of show now. I love that. Classic Who didn't have that. As much as I see people bizarrely try and claim like Verity Lambert was the first showrunner, what the hell are you talking about? That position did not even exist in term or word back in the 60s or 70s or what have you. It's the showrunner as a modern conception, which Doctor Who was a huge part of popularizing in the UK for whatever it's worth. Anyway, in New Who, we have this big, very iconic creative figurehead that we can kind of go to for answers or to put our rage against or whatever else. Classic Who doesn't really have that, and so much. I mean, there are some figures like J&T and Saywood and, well, yeah, I guess Cartmel, although I think that was very much a group era in a lot of ways. But, you know, either they're dead or they're not really the focus like they are with New Who's writing and production. So I see what you mean, that the actors kind of become the figureheads, even though that doesn't make the most sense in the world. And I also think actors aren't all the same. Like someone like Sacha thinks about his character more than someone like Tosin did. It's just true. So Sacha might be a more fitting figurehead to ask about the Master's characterization than Tosin might be for Ryan's. And some of that is what they get as material, and some of it is just that they're all different actors. They all approach the profession differently. They all approach their characters differently. And so some of them are going to take more ownership of the character and some of them aren't. But at the end of the day, none of them are the ones writing the lines.
You were talking about other shows, and I think this is one of the blocks with sci fantasy, is that in a show that is inherently character driven and character led, like you mentioned Better Call Saul, that's a show that doesn't have any drama except the character drama.
Yeah.
In shows like that, the writer is simply forced to know what the characters want and to give them material, essentially. Whereas in a show like this, there's a lot of room to not do that, because, like we've talked about, you can put in endless reams of expository explanation dialogue and sci-fi things going boom. It's very easy to lose sight of the character focus in a show like this. In a way, it's not for more straightforward dramas.
I think character focus as well, some of the ownership comes in if there's more of a reciprocal relationship between the writers and the actor. Like in Better Call Saul itself, Ray Seahorn, her performance in season 1 is part of what informed the character becoming the co-lead of the show and how she started being written in later seasons. That informed how the writers were going to write, because the writers took influence from how the actor was doing it. I think in Doctor Who, maybe Jenna Coleman in Series 7 was not quite what everyone expected, and so she got a lot more depth in the series to come. I assume part of that was because she was delivering to a degree where Moffat could see what more could be done with or maybe when she started performing with Capaldi, Moffat saw what could be done, with this kind of actor. I think there's a kind of feedback loop you can get. If the actor starts giving you something and you start writing it in, then the actor's kind of got some ownership of the character, because it's something they're doing that the writer is then using and feeding into and playing to their strengths. With Chibnall Who, I'm trying to think of, this isn't a diss, I'm actually trying to think, is there any way an actor was playing a character that informed how the show started writing them later? Thasmin is the example, I guess.
Well, Thasmin, yeah.
and Thasmin, I think rightfully we give ownership to Mandip for lots of that, since she spearheaded a lot of that. But I don't get that sense of, like how Captain Jack, so much of that, because he was kind of passed between writers, and Barrowman was so enthused and such a spokesman for the character in the show from the get-go, that, and seeing what Barrowman was able to deliver in Doctor Who itself informed how Chibnall and RTD started writing him differently on this spin-off. I think sometimes there's the reciprocal relationship and sometimes there isn't, which can be a fault of the writers not taking in what the actors are doing, or the actors not giving enough that's changing the writer's perspective on how to do them, I guess.
I think, oddly, Tosin's sort of detachment in Series 11 maybe bleeds through into the writing for Series 12.
Yeah.
But that's sort of going in the wrong direction, I suppose. But I think there might be a bit of a feedback loop there. I'm not sure I can see one with Jodie.
We're talking about Sophie and Janet going, man, doing all that stuff with the Sibes was awesome, and Chibnall going, man, it was awesome giving, Sophie and Janet all that stuff with the Sibes. And we as the viewers, if we're just approaching the show as the show, we can watch the ending of... We watch the ending of Resurrection of the Daleks, and I don't care what any of the actors are saying, because I can watch the text of the show, and I see that ending does not line up at all with what we get here. In fact, it goes completely and utterly against it, which just pulls me out as a viewer, and it lessens the whole idea of a character called Tegan is somewhat broken for me here, because what is the character? There's no character continuity there, and everyone's joy behind the scenes at doing it just kind of distances me from the character. There are some characters which are approached so holistically and so consistently that they're so easy to buy into, like Jenna Coleman's Clara. But that's not even fair. What am I doing? Yeah, there's no consistency. Yeah.
It's a superficial pleasure to be shooting, guns at Cybermen or whatever. And I think the general approach to making this story, and also maybe Doctor Who in general in Chibnall's era, is kind of very superficial. And all the Pillar of Hope shit, all the general sense of the way they use the Cybermen, just throwing stuff in like that. I think there's a superficiality to it that does not lend itself to honouring, character decisions from decades ago. And I think also with Classic Who companions, the moment they go, there are such diverging ideas of who they even become, decades later, especially with Ace, for example. There was all those competing interpretations of who she'd even become. So it just becomes so completely vague that you get them back decades later, and usually quite often you just get a complete mess. I mean, it can be good sometimes. I like how RTD, wrote Joe in the Sarah Jane Adventures, but it's a complete crapshoot, really. And it's all down to how much effort the writer wants to put in. Because the actors aren't gonna veto anything.
There are ways you can dance around. You can dance around the expectations of bringing someone back too. Comparison I'm thinking of here, in the 5 Doctors, Susan comes back with a recast one, and it's their reunion is such shit. It really is. As someone who really loves Susan as a character and who really loves the first Doctor as a character, I've always hated that since I first watched the 5 Doctors as a kid. It's just shit. I feel spat on for investing in those 2 characters. It's such a joke how their reunion is played in the 5 Doctors. There's just it's just bashing the toys together. The toys are together. Look, the 2 are on screen. And they're not even really, because it's not even Hartnell. Anyway, it's just shit to me, because there's what is the joy there beyond, oh, look, it's the characters and they're together again. There's no soul. There's no real sense of their characterizations to how they reunite to me. It is so bloody underplayed. It's just awful to me. Anyway.
It's real bad. But I think it's interesting, quite telling that it's basically been memory hold that it even happened.
Yeah.
People still talk about Dalek Invasion of Earth and that scene like it's the last time the Doctor saw Susan, which isn't true by any metric, even just going off TV. Not true.
Because there's no emotional reality to how it's done in the 5 Doctors. I don't want to remember it.
But yeah, it's so weird and fake that we just ignore it.
I was just going to say, there's ways to have the joy of actor is back and they're with other actor. There are ways to do that and not cancel out the actual sense of character and the actual souls of the characters. It just requires a little bit of thought or creativity. Look at what Moffat did with Billie Piper in the 50th. He gets to bring her back. We all get the joy of having Billie Piper back, but he does it in a slightly clever, slightly creative way that isn't just straightforwardly actor is back as character. No, he thinks of what's the thing I can use from the show to bring her back while not touching some of the big emotional baggage that I don't want to touch from the past showrunner's era. And I thought that worked really well. He got Billie Piper back in the 50th.
We got joy out of that. I wouldn't say all Rose fans got joy out of that. Some of them were a bit annoyed that it wasn't actually Rose.
Fair enough. But I think there's ways to put the toys on the table without fucking around too much with where they were last left. There are always ways to do that. That basically, I don't think the Centenary does that. I think it takes the toys and it does weird things with them. We'll get to it in the commentary, but the Ace and 7th Doctor reunion where she's like, I'm so sorry for being such a brat to you, Doc. You could have had them, you can reunite characters without doing all sorts of weird shit to how they were last left, basically. You just have to be a bit creative about it.
Well, I also think you can do weird shit with where they got left off, but you have to be very careful and intentional with the weird shit you're doing. I don't think anyone would deny that Twice Upon a Time's doing some weird shit with the First Doctor.
And with Bill. Yeah, very strange.
But I think that works. And not everyone does. And with Bill, right? Bring someone back in a way that refracts their exit in an interesting way and adds to it. It's what you always say about additive additions rather than subtractive additions.
Yeah. I think with I don't want to get too distracted into Twice Upon a Time. I'm not a huge fan of what it does with the first Doctor there, but what it does is clearly in service to the actual ideas and themes the episode itself is doing, which at least it's in service to something. It doesn't just feel like I'm bringing something back and I'm doing random shit with it. What's in this centenary? What are we doing? Like, what is the huge? I know there's a natural finality to it since the last one, but I don't feel like the way it's bringing. I feel like it was kind of there on the table for, there's kind of this school reunion-esque parallels, or what are we going to do with paralleling Tegan and Ace with Yaz? But I don't think there's a big grandiose thing eventually done there. So
pretty much, if any companion was put in place of Ace and Tegan, they'd still be shooting up the Cybermen, because that's just how this story works, pretty much.
That beat in particular is very non-specific. I think there's definitely material there that does connect and could be made into a story. The fact that, well, I suppose we'll get to it, but Ace is maybe the most mistreated companion. And Tegan is one of the classic companions who left on properly bad terms. That gives you material to do something with Yaz, and as we've talked about, the complicated and difficult relationship between the Doctor and Yaz, but that doesn't really come to fruition.
Yes, it's another case of there being an obvious story to get, which Chibnall just sails right past. Yeah, it's very usual for him.
Yeah. The thing with Tegan and the Cybes, which really annoys me, is I know we were laughing earlier at the Fifth Doctor's era didn't always treat its characters in the most characterful way. Like, we're laughing at the lack of reaction to Adric. And also with Nyssa and her dad, that's weirdly played, isn't it? It's not much of an issue what the Master ends up doing there. But the ending of Resurrection of the Daleks, that is a great character moment. I think it's a fantastic character moment for Tegan. That is an actual character moment. There's an actual character consequence to what's going on in that special. And Warriors of the Deep, the ending, there as well. There are actually some strong character moments with Tegan being disgusted by violence. So it's just such a joke to me to bring her back and go, let's make Tegan do a bunch of violent stuff. It's going to be so much fun. I'm giddy with joy being the writer that gets to put Tegan into all these violent situations. What did you enjoy about Tegan on the television show? I'm not meaning to invalidate Chibnall's experience with the show. I mean, both Chibnall and myself have obviously watched the Fifth Doctor era and like some of the Tegan stuff in it. But it's just so alien to me that, like, I feel like the strong character moments of Tegan are the big character moments of Tegan, like when she gets disgusted by violence. So to bring her back and just plunge her into violent stuff, I'm just fundamentally so confused.
She was an air hostess, clearly. That gets referenced. So that's clearly what counts.
It's weird when you have ideas like this as a writer, though. The whole forced regeneration thing, you think, oh, is that a thing? Can that be a thing? Can I make that up as a thing? Have we done it in the past? And, they've sort of half done it in the past. It's implied.
When I first read it, I thought that was my regen, and I was a bit panicked.
Did you?
Well, because I was like,
because you don't get told, do you? So you just read the script.
So then when I started to read it, I was like, oh, is that...
I'm only in it for 40 minutes.
Well, yeah, I was a bit like, oh, is that then?
That would have been amazing if she actually died halfway through and then Sacha carried us through to Tennant.
Yeah. I think it's telling even the actor can notice, like, just it's the strange sense of symbology on display when you have a regeneration halfway through the regeneration episode and it's not the regeneration and it doesn't actually contribute to the eventual regeneration and it's just kind of there, and also the main character sort of getting benched halfway through the episode as well. I think it's just a fundamental. It's a strange script. I think you can't not notice it if you're about to perform in it.
The implied forced regeneration he's talking about, I assume that's Troughton's?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, when he says they've half done it before. Yeah, whatever he might be talking about there.
Yeah.
So I find the question of, oh, can I do that? Is that allowed in the rules? Quite funny.
I thought it was funny when he said, oh, you don't get told, do you, Jodie? They mustn't tell. Who's they? You're the boss. I guess not. Like, obviously she knows it's the last episode, but if she's reading it and she's halfway through and she's in, like, the master chambers thing and she's thinking, oh, this is it, then I guess they haven't talked about...
She does not know that she's going to get hit with a space laser in about 20 minutes' time.
I copped it with 40 pages left.
Did he choreograph this himself?
Yeah. What? He can
that? No. Me and you don't have call for that one.
And also, there is so much more than that.
No, there is
you could have done a 3-minute section of Sacha.
Please, you do it as an outtake.
Oh my goodness, you need to put it on the DVD. There's so much of it, and also there was one where it was just one take, the camera just following him all around.
We need this as outtakes.
Yeah.
I feel bereft of not having the outtakes. Like I want to see the 3 minutes.
It's not on the bloody DVD.
God, they have one job.
We got to put this on the DVD, and there's not there. There's only 2 featurettes and the commentary. There's just, where is the Sacha footage? Release it.
It's on Chibnall's hoard. We'll never see it.
Lost media.
Yeah, that was so frustrating to me. You've bought the Blu-ray or the DVD, and you're listening to this special commentary you might have paid, and they're talking about this other great stuff they didn't put on there.
So classic.
Yeah. But interesting to hear that Sacha was choreographing that and everything. That's great. I'm glad he had fun.
Fun that he choreographed it. Yeah. Talk about a triple threat.
Yeah. I think, frankly, we could have used more scenes of Sacha dancing and less of everything else, to be honest with you.
90-minute cut of the Rasputin scene.
Yeah. Release the Sacha cut.
Yeah. The collection set in 3 decades, surely we'll have it. That's what we can wait for.
This has been broken into 2 parts for some other places in the world, and that's where the cliffhanger is for the end of part 1, after he says, "I am the Doctor."
Oh.
Yeah, so it's because obviously not everybody can take a 90-minuter. So.
Could you take a 90-minuter?
Well, it required some alcohol, but I just about got through it.
Are we still talking about Doctor Who?
Yes, Oliver.
All right. I managed. I've watched it twice.
I thought watching the episode at that very point, I thought, man, why don't they just split it here and put it over 2 weeks? Because that's a pretty strong cliffhanger. But
yeah.
I mean, we got the extravaganza instead. That's no issue.
It even works the way this era's cliffhangers work, where that leaves you with a really interesting image, and you would spend all week or however long wondering how it's going to play out, and then you get to the second half and the whole Doctor being the master thing sort of sums to nothing.
Chibnall could have done the fun spoilerphobia thing of don't have any images of Jodie in part 2 of the centenary.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, that'd be good.
Actually play out, maybe she's not in it, guys. Maybe it's Sacha until Shooty or Sacha until the surprise Doctor. That would have been fun. Do you remember Series 8 did that with Mummy on the Orient Express after Kill the Moon? It actually played out, maybe Jenna's not in the next one. She's not in any of the trailers or anything. We're trying to play down the possibility. Yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Oh, really?
That's very clever what they did there.
In the spirit of Chibnall talking about breaking the episode into 2, we're breaking our commentary on the centenary commentary, our meta commentary, into 2, and we're putting in the Eve and Legends commentaries in the middle here because they're a bit slighter than the centenary, so they made less sense to put at the very start or the end. So we're putting them in the middle here.
Hi everyone, this is a audio commentary for the New Year's Day special of Doctor Who's Eve of the Daleks. I'm Anetta Laufer and I'm the director of this episode.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Briggs and I'm the voice of the Daleks in this episode.
Hi, my name is Adjani Salmon and I play Nick in this episode.
When the showrunner's on your commentary, it's great because they've got no one has more insight into the production than them. Director, especially even interesting this episode was an interesting one to direct because of all the resets with the loops. Directors are good. Cast members, I mean, we're all, for an actor gig, you were sounding a little cast phobic earlier in our thoughts, I think. But actors on commentaries always interest me a little bit less. There's exceptions, sure, but because their experience is, very much the practical things, what was the catering like or what were doing the resets like. They've got the lived experience of the actual stresses and trials of doing the performances, which is all very interesting if you're a huge fan of the actor itself, but often they have less insight into an episode than the writer or director or producers sometimes have.
At the very least, you want a lead actor, right? I think there are kind of tiers of significance. You have the leads, maybe the Doctor and Yaz or Sacha or whatever. Then you have the side characters in Who episode, like Nick in this episode. And then, of course, you have the, Dalek voice actor who is on the tier below the others.
In our 5th commentary discussion, our very last episode, the first episode of the era has the director and Jodie herself on. Chibnall's not there, but it's still a great pair with lots to say about the episode. But the one we do before that, the Serengo Conundrum, is full of the guest cast of the episode, which is just inherently, like, they have interesting anecdotes about filming, sure, but of course they have less insight into the whole show because they're guest actors in an episode. And so Nick's actor here, interesting actor, an interesting guy, sure, but we have much less to talk about with the Eve commentary than the centenary one, basically, as a function of that.
This next scene, I thought, was a very challenging one to edit because the tone changes and we're going into something more comedic, but also it is slightly weird to be stuck in a storage unit with a guy who's been collecting all his ex-girlfriend's things.
Yes.
So we had to make sure that he didn't come across as somebody creepy, but somebody who was actually just sweet, but a bit, I don't know whether he'd be deluded, but, you know, somebody who couldn't let go.
You have a lot of ex-girlfriends.
And it was working on the reactions of the others, but also finding the right music or tone or sounds that would allow him to be sweet Nick and not creepy Nick.
Which is a hard balance to strike, I guess, because it was such a... For me, what I thought was so interesting is, for a man who has so many ex-girlfriends, but he's scared to talk to...
Yeah.
to Sarah. I'm like, the maths don't make sense to me.
He's standing right there. That's
fine. No, it's not. I was going to say, a lot of them weren't really girlfriends, were they? They're just like people he'd met for a day. But it's one of those moments where you open up the possibility of something else. Like, is he creepy? Is the story going to go in that direction? Just for a moment, you tease it.
And that's just, I think, the classic case of the creatives having a script on their hand that they have to somehow make sense of, and just having a very big challenge. I think the inherent contradiction of listening to the director describe, how can we make sure he's not creepy? Sorry, you can't. You just can't.
It's an objectively very creepy thing to do and person to be.
And the actor is aware of the inconsistencies in the character. I think that little conversation is very representative of this era's grasp on tone to me, which is confused.
The fact that she mentions editing in particular, the fact that she has to somehow find an editing balance to make the script make sense after it's been written. It's like, I feel like the onus shouldn't really be on, like, the people who... They shouldn't have to make it make sense. It should already make sense before it gets in the hands of the director and the actor, right? I think that's fair enough to ask.
It's like the... Well, it's kind of like the finality thing, isn't it? Sometimes the horse is bolted too far to catch. It's like the fix it and post thing of, like, this script needed more time. It needed... I don't know what it needed. It needed something, clearly. Because by the time they get to making it and then editing it, they've got what they've got. It's like we were talking about the singularity of focus and clarity of focus earlier. And that's not really present here, isn't it? They're struggling with the tone, all of them, the way they're talking. Even, I mean, they're all being jocular about it and everything, but there's clearly confusion in that scene for the audience and for the people making it, which just isn't fun.
It's an odd thing of having written that character, both aware that they are a real creep, and also trying to sell the romantic tone, and the episode just lets that contradiction exist, and having other creatives trying to explain it. It's interesting that Briggs is sort of trying to justify it, the director's trying to lead one interpretation over the other, trying to make it seem like he's more romantic than creepy, as if that part of the script is something to be overcome. It's just it doesn't cohere, right? Everyone's trying to do something different with the idea, which is always going to cause problems.
Yeah, and they're talking around the fact that the script is the problem here, that the script, this gaping contradiction, is something they're having to try and mount this hurdle.
The next clip, Briggs actually makes a rather insightful comment on how Chibnall's scripts tend to work.
This is kind of like one of the signature things of Chris Chibnall's Doctor Who, where he has this kind of reorientation scene that, you know, where the characters take stock and then they zoom off at the end to achieve, you know where you're going.
Well spotted. Chibnall does seem to do these whole group scenes where, okay, we have a plan how we're going to sort out the plot now. Let's run off. Everyone do it.
He's very stop-start. Yeah.
Here's the thing you need to know for Act 3, it tends to be.
Yes. I think it also connects to this thing that I think we mentioned early. I think we mentioned in the Power of the Doctor discussion, the idea that Chib approaches Doctor Who plots as business that the characters have to solve, basically work to do. So, you know, here's our meeting. Here's our meeting, everyone. Now go away and do your tasks. It's among us.
And she had this brilliant idea, which I loved. She said, at the end of this, when the Daleks arrive, she would really like to have a Marvel moment, which is why we then went, right, okay, step forward and stand there, and this time you're not going to flinch when they when they shoot you. And I think it was such a brilliant idea. It worked really well. And this is her Marvel moment.
Oh. Ah, yes. But they still kill her.
In the lead up to Series 11, our execs, Stevens and Chibnall, often talked about Marvel, about superhero stuff. So just interesting to see that running thread. Jodie also has that engagement with Marvel.
Yeah, in particular, it feels more prominent here than it had previously in Chib Who. I mean, even just like the music and the tone and the whole like stand in the thing. And it does seem quite notable here, the Marvelization.
I think it really works as a beat. I'm happy to hear that Jodie had a say in that, because your big heroic into Act 3 moment being dying is just neat. That's a neat use of the time loop format.
Yeah.
And now we're going to die, but we've got a plan, so we're going to win next time. It works. And dying heroically obviously ties up with the centenary as well, which we're talking about.
Yeah, it's very easy to sneer at sort of Marvel mentions and stuff, but I think it's a model of storytelling that has actually had a lot of success. And I think Chibnall Who has often struggled to find any sort of model for its storytelling whatsoever, let alone a functional one. So yeah, it makes sense that people want to bring in stuff that works in some form.
I think one of the huge successes and what people adore about Marvel is the kind of the linkages that run through all the different courses of Marvel, the different films and the different TV shows, and how it all links together, and it all feels very cohesive and like it's actually part of the same unit, not like it's just a soup with random shit thrown in it. And that is, you know, it's often said, but RTD did that with Torchwood, Sarah Jane Adventures, and New Who itself. He very successfully navigated 3 shows that each were pitched to a different audience and had, you know, they had different tones, but they all felt like the same thing, didn't they? They all felt like the same underpinning world between them. And that's why they could all link in quite tidily in The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. And people really loved that back when those were all airing. And that's something people really love about Marvel. So yeah, I don't think there's any like negativity necessarily about Doctor Who doing something Marvel did well, or Marvel doing something that Doctor Who did well.
I would also point out that for all their deeply uninspired storytelling tendencies in general, those movies are actually really good at pairing together form and theme on a film-to-film basis. Each one is a slightly different form, a very, very minor variation on a formula, but the theme always ties back into that change in form. And here, the themes of facing death and the circular logic of the time loop story ties up really well. So it does feel like a Marvel moment.
I mean, I had said to them at the beginning that I thought this episode was about love.
I don't know what to do, Dan.
And he said later on that the reason he could do the scene is because that's what he focused on.
He is John Bishop.
Oh, okay, right. So I was confused then. Who's she talking about? Right. Okay.
Well, I think it's linking back to the centenary commentary thing. These episodes are about 13 and Yaz. You know, Eve is about love. There's some focus there.
Yeah. Yeah, although I think it's telling as usual that Eve has to focus on love by introducing 2 other characters who are in love, and then having Yaz kind of be like a sort of parallel or sort of spin-off from that in a way. Of course, she doesn't get to, the side characters get to articulate their feelings to each other. Yaz and 13 don't.
It's very inelegant as a way of doing a parallel, having exactly the same thing one pair of characters over. Instead of doing something more obscured or more metaphorical, or even just using Dan's relationship, which has just been set up. It's a very broad way of doing that parallel, but it does get you a story that's about love. So
Chib used his one metaphor slot on the time loop for the cyclical relationship thing. He couldn't do another metaphor for the actual relationship. It's just one metaphor too many.
Yeah. Would have been nice to have Mandip on that commentary, and or Jodie.
Yeah.
But alas. Moving into the second special, Legend of the Sea Devils.
Hi, this is Haolu. I'm the director of the episode, and I'm here with our wonderful actors, Craig Els and Crystal Yu, who played the Chief Sea Devil and also Madame Ching in this episode. And this was a great idea by Chris from the very beginning. He absolutely wanted. He said if there's one image that inspired the whole episode, it's this image. It's a sea devil ship hovering over a Chinese village.
So again, we have a creature actor.
Yeah.
In the commentary.
And a secondary character.
The creature actors have a hugely interesting job, and they're very good at what they do, and it's very interesting practice. And, you know, it has its own level of insight. But you can see why the commentaries we find more to talk about are the ones with people a bit more central to the actual episodes. As interesting as what Craig Els has to say is. I would have liked to hear it from Chibnall's own mouth, his inspiration for the episode. So, Sea Devil's Chinese village.
Again, the episode sort of gestures towards some link there. The Sea Devils and all the true inhabitants of Earth, monsters under the surface, have a lot of potential for interesting storytelling. And that image sort of gestures towards it. But
also, I think Chib really just likes floating pirate ships because they look cool.
It feels to me akin with the bullet train thing, where it's an image that is maybe a bit interesting in and of itself, but not massively rich. It's just a bit odd.
And I mean, it goes without saying, but this episode links into a lot of the finality stuff, because final is not the word I'd use to describe this episode in any sense at all. And also that sense of, you know, improvisational, fixed and post type of thing. Our next set of clips that's, you know, pretty much what they're about.
Craig, did you have to do a lot of your lines in ADR just so that you all, because of with the mask, or were you able to do most of it when we were filming?
We did. We tried it both ways, but because of the challenges with the mask that we decided to go with in the end, I couldn't actually do my lines live because it caused too much movement. So we recorded my lines to be played on set for the other actors, sort of scene by scene, and then every line was done in ADR afterwards, just for clarity and precision, and to have another go. But yeah, just one of the challenges.
Sorry about his app.
Oh yeah, this sort of necklace thing that he wore that sort of glowed every time he spoke, because the mouth didn't move necessarily until the stuff they did in post. But trying to get that to sync up, sometimes it would work, sometimes it wouldn't. Do you remember?
Yeah.
I was going to say, I love that you can audibly hear that it's over Zoom with like the shitty audio quality.
I know we got into this in our David Tennant casting discussion, but everything Craig is revealing to us there, we knew long before, didn't we?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He's so specific with his revelations there, and they're all revelations we very specifically knew long in advance, thanks to the leaks endemic to this era of Doctor Who. And so that's just a horsey mouth thing I wanted again, like some of the Chibnall stuff. It's just great to hear stuff we knew and we'd been saying for a long time. There's the creature actor himself saying the very same things about the mess with the Sea Devils.
I'd love to have seen what it looked like when the actor was trying to talk underneath the mask and it caused too much movement, in his words. I'm just imagining the mask just wiggling backwards and forth or up and down, just looking like complete shit. I bet that was hilarious.
No, it's okay. They fixed it in post.
There's no better example of lack of final quality, isn't there, than you have a problem that bad on a production that necessitates redoing it like that. It's just such a mess.
That blooming digital effect on the mouths. God, that looks bad. It's so rubbish.
Yeah.
Just blurring the warping of the face. Oh, God.
It's like the director, that's not her fault. And it just does a disservice to everyone who does a good job or any sort of job on the episode. Just the lack of planning, it just screws everyone over.
fact it wasn't even the first compromise, the fact that the glowing necklace was the initial compromise, but then that wasn't good enough, so they had to also do a second compromise with the digital mouth warping thing. And things like doubling up, stacking up on top of each other, just because things are such a clusterfuck.
This is why I love that RTD2 now is being filmed so far in advance, like Bad Wolf Productions like to do. That is a very good idea.
I filmed it nearly like a independent film. It was approached not very, classic Doctor Who. I would say it's very still and very simple, and I wanted to film them not frontal. Actually, there's no frontal close up in the scene, but it's it's from the side where we're with them in their own feelings. It felt more right to me.
I feel like the people behind the era thought the Yaz stuff was working, and like in micro senses, a scene well directed or not can work without like the larger arc of it working at all.
Yeah, I hadn't actually picked up on what she describes there with the complete lack of the frontal close-ups. The fact it's all shot like from the sides or from kind of behind or kind of with them together. That's a really nice and subtle choice. Like, I like that. I mean, yeah, as much as we can talk about the actual content of the scene or whatever, but just as a little thing, it's a just great example of someone behind the camera doing that little bit of extra work to try and make Chibnall stories work better than they necessarily do.
Yeah, it's a really lovely directorial touch.
Yeah, it was.
And like you say, it's not showy enough that you would consciously notice it. And they're not massively unconventional shots, but just framing the conversation with the 180 behind them. It's really cool. It really works. They're both looking away, failing to look at each other, and it's enhanced by their performances as well.
Yeah.
And it's very reminiscent of the last scene in Eve, where they're standing next to each other, not quite looking at each other.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some through lines with these last three.
And I suppose that ties up with the ice cream on top of the TARDIS. Again, sitting next to each other, shot from behind, not looking at each other.
Yeah, so it's a classic example of the repetition and regression, the lack of development in a way, just things repeating.
Mandip getting the part of Yaz is one of the best things to ever happen in my career, because I have spent 3 solid years, I'm going to cry, with one of the world's best human beings.
One last trip. Where would you choose? What flavour ice cream?
And she is going to be one of my best friends for the rest of my life. And the fact that we're both leaving at the same time is really emotional. Treasuring new friendships and treasuring jobs that are not a guarantee and have been such a pleasure. I think for me and Mandip, this will be one of the best times of our entire life, and we know it. And I think we're both very ready to leave, but it won't stop the heartache of it. But seeing it out hand in hand with her is one of the best things ever to happen to me.
It's taken 4 years of my life. It's been the best 4 years. Me and Jodie are so close. We've travelled like to different countries to film together. I know we are going to be friends forever, but we're not going to work together every day. And it's been amazing. We have such a laugh. Like, we're such good friends.
Oh.
There's your finality linking with your cast relationship with the show there. Lots of that.
Yeah, I think in a real sense, I mean, obviously this is such a trite observation at this point. We've said this so many times, but the emotional pull of Jodie and Mandip's relationship seems a lot bigger than the handling of 13 and Yaz's like separation and departure within the show. I mean, it just feels like the relationship between the actors is almost substituting for much actual pathos between the characters. Like, I feel more emotion watching that clip there than I did watching the actual scene in the episode. You know, they even mentioned there that they're going out hand in hand with each other, and like 13 and Yaz, they barely get to hold hands, do they?
Well, I think that links into the Sophie and Janet stuff we were talking about earlier, with this kind of confused sense between character and actor with the fans and with the actors and with the show itself. Because if our emotions are coming more from the actor relationship there, it all bleeds into the characters in weird ways, because they look the same. That's the function of actors being actors. It's an interesting little melting pot there.
Yeah, I think the parallel with Classic, I think, even goes a bit deeper, because I think, in a sense, because the actor stays around after Classic Who for so many years, doing all these big finish, doing all these conventions, doing all this stuff, in a way, almost, they have more time to develop a relationship with the audience than the character did on TV. So you get that classic actor-character substitution thing. The fans feel more attachment to the actor than the character in some ways.
Well, that's even, like, there feels like pre-existing relationships between some cast members when there never has been, just because they'll be on the convention run all the time together. It's like Sophie and Janet were never on the show together before, but they know each other from conventions, and so there's kind of a shorthand of a relationship there. It's all a funny stew, what's real and what isn't there. But I feel like there's a disconnect when we're talking finality and emotions there between, the Jodie Mandip relationship, which we feel there's great emotion there, and then the Yaz Doctor relationship, which is thorny.
Fucking ice cream.
Yeah, it's cold as an ice cream in so many ways.
There's something really interesting in, I know that we're going to be friends for the rest of our lives. Incredibly sweet. And they both say that separately. Absolutely wonderful. Talking about an episode where one dumps the other, and the characters explicitly aren't going to be friends for the rest of their lives. Just odd.
Well, we've already talked about the place where former actors of the show can socialise together forevermore. In fact, I feel like that's the reason a lot of them do it in the first place. So
I hear they've got good lunches.
Yeah.
The other thing about this is, and again, it's like credit to Ray and you and the original costume. Sasha looks amazing in your costume.
No.
You look amazing in your costume. Sasha also.
No, but that's what is ace about that costume, is it works for anyone. It's really comfortable, and
it's really but I was really worried when I was writing. I was thinking, well, that just looks stupid, and the way it kind of just carries off.
Yeah, but it feels like
there's a threat to
I love that. I'd not
very interesting in light of recent developments.
Yeah, RTD didn't get that memo.
I think it does look good, by the way. I think it looks good on Sasha.
Like, it's easy to sneer at the whole Master and Doctor's clothes bit, but I think it might just be because Sasha's, like, kind of smallish, on the small side. The same with Jodie. Like, unlike Tennant, who's, like, massive. Yeah, I feel like that something about him slides into that look and that costume in this episode pretty well. I love that clip because that aged brilliantly with RTD and Doctor Who magazine talking this big talk about why he couldn't put Tennant in 13's outfit, and it was one of his first stipulations that Tennant couldn't be in that outfit, and all the dramas and discourse that emanated out of that. So lovely to hear the counter opinion. Yeah, it's interesting. There was like, RTD talks about being so concerned that the press will kind of like be ravenous for Tennant in Jodie's costume. Of course, there's been no particular attention to Sacha and Jodie's costume at all. And I think obviously it's a completely different situation. And I think it symbolises just the sheer difference in weight between, I guess, the content of the centenary versus the incoming new Tennant world that we're stepping into.
I don't want to write off his reasoning altogether, and I think there's some intelligent things that Russell's doing there by being the stuff that he understands about being a prominent gay creative that a lot of other people don't. But I also think he is obscuring slightly the truth that he just didn't want the big premier image of his new era to have any baggage. Yeah. I think that's the big thing. He was never going to start in 2005 by having one of the classic Doctors regenerate. So he wasn't going to start his new era.
Yeah, imagine Eccleston in McGann's costume walking around.
Well, that back in 2005, there was a website that had like entries and stuff, and one of them was like basically describing the Ninth Doctor being in McGann's costume, wandering around, I think Millennium Day or something, wandering around, muttering time-war-y things. That ignited little young Neo's imagination very much. Some of us imagine that all the time, so...
True, but they didn't actually do it on screen, like with Eccleston, though. It's a different thing.
No, of course.
Yeah.
Well, the next centenary clip also kind of mentions RTD. Let's listen to that one.
It was a big part. I wrote this scene and I thought, well, I don't think that's ever going to happen. Nobody's going to say yes this. And also thinking, is that the right thing to do in a episode where it's your last episode? You know, thinking, but what I really want to do is like connect your Doctor back into the history of the show.
Because it's the regen, or also because of the BBC centenary?
I was worried about it because it's the regen. I don't want to take focus from you. And but the reason I wanted to do it was because it was a centenary, and you wanted to do lots of things that just paid tribute to the history of the BBC, history of the show, but not too much because you got the 60th anniversary of Doctor Who the year after, and I knew that was going to be big. So, you know,
the scene he's talking about there is that odd sense of like trepidation to it. The idea that like 13, they're saying to 13, you can't just give up now. We have to continue. We're not finished. The show must go on. And there's that sense of almost implicit, that meta anxiety about the show's future. That's kind of, Chib doesn't really talk about it here, but it's running on. It's an undercurrent in the scene, isn't it?
Yeah. I wonder when he said, it's pure speculation that one day will or won't be cleared up, but he knew the 60th was going to be big. The whole timeline, as you know, the Doctor here would say, is interesting to me. It's sort of confused. I wonder when people learnt what, like, is what Russell was saying in that recent Doctor Who magazine of, oh, well, we're going to do the thing with Tennant, and then maybe it evolved into something more. Like, was the idea of a Tennant 60th going to happen before the whole enormous move to Bad Wolf and shooting everything? It's all, who knows? It's all very curious.
I mean, it could be, when he says the 60th is going to be big, that could just be an assumption on his part.
Yeah.
Like, you shoot, okay, the BBC will sort something out, it'll be the 60th, it'll be big, whatever.
There's also the whispers, that Russell's quite happy that the centenary dealt with the classic Doctors and did that corner of fan service so that the 60th doesn't have to.
Anything that liberates anniversaries or the need to be anniversary-ish, I think is fantastic. Yeah, I think it's the benefit of having two anniversaries so close together is that you can get all the anniversary gunk out of the way in one of them and then do something a little more interesting with the other one. I mean, I know to a lot of people the idea of David is back with Catherine doesn't sound interesting at all. It sounds very tied. But I mean, it's still not what anniversaries usually are, is it? Anniversaries are usually, we have different Doctors and they interact and they say you've redecorated at each other. So it's nice to be freed up from the... Like, fans surely have had their stock of that. Like, you've had it in 2022. Surely you're not going to be in 2023 going, you know, even with all these bloody Big Finish monthly anniversary things happening, I need Tennant to say you've redecorated to someone. You know, I need this to happen. Like, I don't think that's going to happen with many fans at all. We've had the centenary. You're going to have the endless Big Finish 60th audios. The 3 60th specials can be their own thing, I think, is probably the benefit of, their prominence to each other, their proximity to each other.
Given their apparently seemingly quite close working relationship, do you think that the Big Finish 60th material might also be offloading some of the responsibilities of the main show? Because that seems like a very, look, Doctors interacting.
You say responsibilities. I don't think the show has those responsibilities to do any of that shit. It's just the fan expectation. It's entitlement.
No, but people definitely hold them to it. Yeah, people are going to complain if you...
Big Finish doesn't even have those responsibilities. Like my beloved Zagreus for the 40th anniversary. I mean, it had the Doctor actors in it, but they weren't doing what fans might have liked them to be doing. They weren't playing their Doctors.
It's much more interesting.
I think because this 60th Big Finish series thing has been in the works for years and years, it has to just by nature predate any of this RTD stuff. But I think functionally it's going to do some of that same thing of, hey, if you want Tom Baker saying, oh, you know, nice, whatever, to Paul McGann, that's over here. You can go have that here. Yeah, I think definitely by function it does that.
What if Joe Martin and the curator fought the Ogrons?
Yeah.
Someone wrote me a check. That's a great idea.
The last of the 60th audios I see comes out a bloody year after the rest of them. My just pure conjecture, my assumption would be that first lot of 60th audio monthly series is going to be the thing they've been planning and working on for 3 years. And then the last thing maybe ties a little bit more into later developments and later castings. That would be my assumption. But talking of taking ideas too far, let's listen to the next clip.
There are so many insane ideas in this episode. Like the whole idea of the Doctor regenerating into the Master, I was just like, Once I had that idea, I literally walked around with it for days, just going,
Too much.
No, too far, too far. I was like, oh, whatever.
I know it doesn't work for everyone, and I know the sense it makes is objectionable, and I know it probably sent the wiki into a fit, but I kind of like the idea of, it was just a weird idea, regenerating into someone else. I liked the kind of idea of the Doctor is just completely shutted out. Like, it's not like he's just replacing the Doctor to go, nah, I'm the Doctor and I did something bad. He's not just doing that. There is no Doctor. He's taken over a body. She doesn't exist in any sense. I thought that was I like that idea. I thought that was an appealing idea. I have no issue with the Master Doctor idea.
Well, she's in that void with Paul McGann, but that's the only sense in which she exists.
Yeah.
I think when Chib talks about this being, oh, it's too far. Oh, it's too ambitious. Oh, I could never do this. I'll never get away with this. Oh, it's too far. But, when he talks about it like that, and then we see what he actually did in the episode, which, essentially just kind of amounts to it just being the Master in a different costume. I think his sense of what is too far and what is some crazy, huge idea is maybe not that expansive. Because I think with the whole Doctor regenerating to the Master idea, there are quite much more elaborate and enormous things you could potentially do with that. Just because the nature of regeneration, and even just like the Master having some element of the Doctor's memories or something like that, anything like that, there's a lot you could have done, and it doesn't quite. I mean, it just doesn't feel like a huge idea in the episode when it happens,
because it's just not really substantiated as an idea. It doesn't really bear any fruit. I like how expressly metaphysical it is. It's just, look, one character is the other character now in some weird, undiegetic way, but it doesn't actually create any drama from those conditions, because, like you say, it's functionally identical to the Master shooting the Doctor with a big gun. And it's odd as well that, I don't know, it doesn't seem massively daring to me. It's sort of contentious in a fanny way.
Yeah.
Like, like you say, it messes up the wiki.
Yeah.
Without being really narratively boat pushing.
Yeah, it doesn't stir the pot.
Exactly. I can think of a lot of stories that are more daring, and one that comes to mind is The Girl Who Died, which is a really daring story in what it's doing, and it's doing something very different, but it's also an entirely ordinary episode that doesn't have any pretense of being the biggest thing ever. And so often the really interesting bits of storytelling come in those forms rather than in doing a biggest thing ever.
Yeah.
It feels like an RTDS, just ever escalation of the stakes, but without bringing them back down to a reasonable scale afterwards. It's like going, what if the Master was everyone everywhere? It's almost exactly the same idea, in fact.
I didn't like it then. But
no, me neither.
Having said how brilliant Peter is, Sylvester is so extraordinary in this scene. It's so beautiful and so heartbreaking.
You never failed me, Professor.
I mean, they're both amazing, because also this dynamic and the fact that they've been friends for decades.
Yeah.
It's all there in the scene, and
Could you imagine us coming back in 30, 40 years' time doing the scene opposite
you'll be
each of
back.
those characters? I'm going to age better than you. I'll still look like me now. Yeah, you'll have had loads of work done. Face yoga.
I seem to recall in our Power of the Doctor chat, we actually talked about the idea of like some sort of reprise where like the Yaz comes back and apologizes to the Doctor or something like that in the same way as this scene. That'd be fun.
It's like the kind of big finishy discussions we've been having as well. It's like the confining you to, in a few decades you can be wheeled out in the anniversaries, or you can be wheeled out in the EU stuff. It's they've accepted their fate as kind of being past the era of being incumbent in the show now, but they don't sound unhappy about the prospect of coming back for those kind of requisite things.
Interesting. They mentioned the decades of friendship between Sylvester and Sophie and how that informs like the scene. That's completely connected to what we were just talking about. The idea of the actors having so much just accumulated history and stuff, and even stuff outside the show, that it's just sort of almost substituting for actual content in the scene. Because I think I think there's so much sentimental attachment to Sylvester and Sophie, like just being together on screen again, that I think a lot of people are maybe like really moved by the scene or whatever, without being particularly fussed about what Chibnall wrote them to say in the scene, if you see what I'm gesturing at.
It's the other side of the Tegan Cyberman thing, isn't it? It's Tegan and Cyberman. They used to be in episodes together.
I think Sylvester's performance is really good because I love Sylvester all the time, but I mean, whenever like he's very good at the soft, sort of mournful kind of monologues like this. So that element works as well. I think there are a lot of things working in the scene's favour, even if I hate what they're saying in it.
The form's fine. It's just the content is repugnant.
I also think I think you can tell that Sophie Aldred is mostly an audio actor these days, which I say with love because I think she's often very good on audio. But she seems slightly not used to the visual dimension. I think that comes across in her performance a little bit, where Sylvester's very, very confident. Because he's big. It's great. It occurs every now and then that he's actually a big actor. Like he's in stuff bigly.
Sylvester had a big hit on video this year. Yeah, the video where he had the helicopter hat on. That was a lovely visual, great image.
He recently fell for a meme about Rihanna.
Oh god.
Yeah, he's
great. Love it.
He's an active fellow. Yeah.
Because she taught us to never give up, even if someone steals your very existence.
And the whole episode. When I watched this in the edit, that's when I knew the title. It was your speech. Like that's when I knew you could call it The Power of the Doctor.
Ooh, look at you.
It's about
big impact.
Right. Got that fucking line. She taught us to never give up even if someone steals your very existence. It's like, really? She taught you that specific thing?
Happens all the time.
How often is someone going to steal your very existence? Yeah.
And again, very existence is very fluffy wording. What is that? What is being stolen there?
Your existence itself.
I really wish they'd just committed and called it and had the line, friendship is the real power of the Doctor. I really wish they'd just put that in, 'cause you might as well at this point.
Yeah, that would have required Chib to know like what he was going for as he was writing it, rather than watching it in the edit and realising, oh right, it's the power of friendship. Yeah. I think it's fun. He describes it as this flash of inspiration the moment he watches Yaz saying that speech that he wrote. But the nature of the inspiration is just the most generic thing imaginable. Like, yeah, no shit. the Doctor has friendship. Yes, it's such a trite observation at the end of the day, isn't it?
The whole episode, it's not like the Doctor has friends is a reveal in the episode. The episode starts from the assumption that, look, all these friends that the Doctor has, and then it shows the complicated and often ugly relationship she has with them, and then it gets to the end and goes, friendship is the power of the Doctor, without resolving the fact that it's all ugly.
And a few minutes later, she abandons all her friends. Yeah, you see a whole room of them that's been dumped.
The power of the Doctor as friendship isn't a reveal. That's not a conclusion to the story being told. That was one of the suppositions at the beginning.
Really, the episode makes more of an argument that the power of the Doctor is that fucking hologram.
The power of the Doctor is the fact that she can be taken out of the narrative and just turned back up in half a dozen different ways. It's her old faces. It's the old souls of the old actors coming back and saying some lines.
Our next clips are also about things that were taken out of the narrative. It's 2 clips, but they're about the same thing. Let's watch those.
You brought me back. This is really close to the end. Wasn't this Sacha's rap?
Oh, I don't know. Good memory.
I'm sure he rapped us.
Guess that's me done.
In this location.
Oh, I am a genius.
Yeah, he did a little bit more, didn't he? Came out of that location, but also he did the bit, because there's a bit that's been cut, we had to cut in the edit, of him crawling out of a gutter in St. Petersburg and coming back to life. But,
too long, or just didn't?
It couldn't. In the edit, it was just, it's at the end. It's like, I don't care about that. I'm actually all in. I'm in the Doctor and Yaz's story by then. Yeah, so this bit where the Master comes back to life, or has survived, was the start of a little strand where, at the end of this scene, he gets confronted by a character called Yusupov, who, unfortunately, we had to cut from the whole episode. Brilliant actor, played Yusupov for 3 scenes. We had to cut, not because of him, because he was amazing.
Did he know?
Yeah. We tell people if that ever happens. That very rarely happens.
That's the weird Rasputin. A guy shoots him. He gets assassinated.
Yes. And apparently another bit where he crawls out of a gutter after being assassinated, I guess, to sort of be alive still. Which is how he gets back to his TARDIS.
Again, really funny that there's this big plot about the Master's bodies and dying and regenerating and whatnot, and it's just entirely disconnected from the Rasputin dying several times thing, which is also just in the episode. I mean, it's not, it got cut, but again, just putting the same idea in lots of times and not bothering making it one idea.
There's such a pattern with Chib only having sensible instincts in the edit after putting in some insane shit. Like the Noranyat Khan death scene in Spyfall that was written, shot, and then cut in the edit. Like, what is this doing here? Yeah, why does he keep doing this? Why is he doing this again? He has some random historical material just for shits and giggles. No, actually, watching the edit, this makes no sense. Why is this here? This is supposed to be a Regeneration episode. Get rid of it. Like, why does this keep happening?
If I had a nickel for every time a historical execution was edited out of a Chibnall episode at the last minute.
With the Master in it?
I'd have 2. With the Master in it. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
That's our next commentary discussion as well, listeners, is all about Spyfall 2 and all the little tidbits you're hearing about there.
The Master exploding all the volcanoes in the world was something right at the start. Like, one of the things when I was first thinking about doing the job, I was like, I want somebody to explode all the volcanoes. It's taken me all this time to figure it out. And then I've always been like, but how would you solve exploding all the volcanoes in the world?
Turn it into public art.
Turn them to steel.
Wow.
Yeah.
An even older idea than the triple threat, like exploding all the volcanoes in the world. Like that, just when he went to the job, he wanted to do the partition of India and exploding all the volcanoes in the world. That is just such a classic encapsulation of Chibnall.
To be honest, I find that quite endearing.
Yeah, honestly. You do a lot worse.
I wish there was something neater to get from exploding all the volcanoes to freezing all the volcanoes, because I like that idea, but firing a big laser at it doesn't quite work. I think it's neat. And the Doctor gets a line where she's like, I've turned a world-ending threat into public art, which I think is a fun Doctor line. I like that as something the Doctor does. Exploding all the volcanoes. Great.
The next clip is of the kiss that never was seen, which I feel like we had to hear whatever the actors were saying over that scene, whatever they were going to say. So let's see what they said over the unkiss.
That's not me. I'd love to take credit, but that's Belinda.
Do you remember George when they were like, are you going to be able to get her? I was like, yes.
Everyone was really...
like she was a heifer.
Mandip, is it? Mandip, you all right?
Mandip lifting
How are you,
you up?
Mandip? Like, in between takes, right? You can put it down, Mandip. You okay, man? Oh, my God.
Do you have to pick her up for the rehearsal? She's not that big.
So this shot is amazing. This shot and this score here. Wow. That's all I'm ever going to be thinking about now.
What?
Do all my own stunts. Even got her off at floor.
Your method there. 2 hats in there. Carry me. Hello, baby.
I would have been more delicate with you if I knew.
I know.
Well, there you go.
No kiss, it turns out. What a surprise.
Yeah. One assumes if it had been in there, it would have been a bit of a... It would have come up, basically.
But there was a pregnant Jodie.
Yeah, sweet.
Oh, yeah.
Although we didn't need the commentary to confirm that a thing that didn't happen on screen didn't happen.
Yes, I'm glad there wasn't an 11-minute silence over this bit. Otherwise, the ambiguity would have been eternal.
Yeah, we had to have that coverage in just in case anyone thought I was hoarding a revelation there.
It's a sweet moment, but it's the moment that it is, rather than something entirely different.
Yeah,
which people want it to be.
Well, speaking of scenes that we might have wanted to be something different, so the next thing is a clip from the featurette, and then it's a clip from the commentary. We'll do it together. It's about the ice cream.
I suppose there's a real loneliness to it.
but in that there's a sacrifice because you know the worst bit's coming, so you don't want to do that to somebody. And I think for both of them, trying not to say goodbye will be really emotional. And particularly, you know, we're filming it on the last day, it's the last scenes, we're filming in story order, that's the only day we'll do it where it'll be in story order. And, you know, there's quite a bit of fun with the scene with Mandip. Even though it's like an emotional scene, we've got an ice cream.
God, what a journey we've been on.
I know.
Oh my God.
It's been ace, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I keep thinking back to your recall, Mandip.
I know.
And with Jodie, you were there that day, and Jodie was just like,
Adamant.
"It's her. She's my best friend." We were like, "Jodie, we just got to look on screen."
2017.
Yeah.
That's how long this journey's been.
Yeah. I keep thinking back to the first little quiet read-through we had, the secret read-through, where we're to introduce you all to each other.
And Brad was telling us all his show.
It come from the Savoy.
Even though it's an emotional scene, we still have an ice cream.
Really putting a cooler on the whole thing.
Yeah.
Bringing the temperature down.
Yeah.
Again, the whole thing of them not saying goodbye to each other, it's just sort of taken as read. I feel like we still don't get much of a justification for why they can't just talk to each other at the very end. It's like,
the whole running theme we have here of the difference with the actor relationship to what's being filmed to our relationship to the final product is like, Mandip is so audibly emotional in the commentary there. And then, like Oliver's joking, like the episode itself, it comes off so cold, like how restrained kind of that scene is. It's just frustrating that we have actors who are equipped and good and can do the job, and the actors themselves have the emotions necessary to do an emotional job, but what they get given to do and how it all ends up edited and directed is like cold, or colder than it should be, or could be.
It's interesting what you were saying before, that the behind-the-scenes stuff is more emotionally charged than what's on screen a lot of the time, and I'm certainly feeling more from the unscripted little bits of conversation between them, or the two clips of Jodie and Mandip talking separately about each other. I feel a lot more from that. It feels like a very honest conversation about that relationship, which isn't happening on screen.
It feels like the actors have gone on a bigger journey than the characters, which is pretty fucking wild when you consider they've been in the TARDIS flying around space and time for years and Yaz's time at this point.
To work with all the Doctor's friends, it was just really, really great to see them all. It was lovely to be part of that.
But I came back and I actually can't tell anyone because they'd have me put away. And that started me thinking, though, I can't be the only one. I can't. And look, I'm not.
And some form of therapy session for all of the Doctor's friends. It was really great, and I really liked that scene.
This
I reckon
next scene I had thought about for years and years. Like I've thought about this for about 15 years. That I think, what do all the companions do? Like, because I was just like, there must be a like equivalent of AA, like Doctors
for 15
Anonymous.
Years you've thought about.
Yeah, because it's been ever written for the show. I was like, where do those companions go? They can't just wander around.
This happens in real life. It's called conventions.
Yeah, yeah, that's where they are. They go out into a massive hall after this.
AA is the comparison.
Therapy,
AA. What? Why? So that's another thing Chibnall's been planning forever, is what do companions do? They have a grief, tragic therapy. What is his mind here? Like, when Russell brought back companions, I'm thinking he had Joe was off doing all these adventures. It just felt more jubilant. Like here, it's so odd to me that obviously Chibnall loves these characters, but what do they do? They must have an AA-esque therapy session.
When RTD brought Sarah Jane back, he gave her own show, her own entire TV show. Whereas Chib's 15-year-long conception of what the companions are and what their life is and what the show is this sense of this shared trauma. I think this is like the closest thing he has to a vision of Doctor Who that's been with him for longer than the 3 years he's been working on the show. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, it feels this is like the underlying Chibnall coming out here in this sequence. This is his vision. That's wild.
I think as the more pointed climax to a story, everyone goes to therapy could be a really interesting ending. If it was about recognizing that it's been painful and difficult, and if I suppose Yaz's side of the relationship and how unfair it's been on her was at the center of the story, then going to therapy might actually be quite a meaningful way of ending that story. If the story was aware of the fact that this relationship that the show's built around isn't healthy, but the show both recognizes that the characters need therapy and acts as if that's absolutely nothing to do with anything that's actually happened in the show, and there's nothing wrong with the Doctor or the relationship as it's been on screen. It's a fine relationship, you just happen to need loads of therapy after it.
It's this fusion of pessimism with apathy, like a fundamentally pessimistic outlook on like the show and on life and stuff, but also treated like, well, there's nothing that can be done, who cares? Just like this is detached.
Yeah, the 15 years thing just gets me. That's amazing. So this has really been part of his head.
Yeah.
For a really significantly long time. That's just so interesting. Yeah, like we said, that's his vision for the companions. It's very telling. It's very interesting. It's all there. Therapy, grief, Alcoholics Anonymous. Wow. And then also the convention mentioned that's more of our actor relationship with the show is different than our relationship with the show. Reuniting at conventions, interacting with fans that way. That's in the future for Jodie and Mandip. So there's that to look forward to.
Yeah, so even the convention, the comparison though, like when you look at what a convention is, this huge gathering full of supportive fans and love and adulation and stuff like that, where you compare that to what we see on screen here, just a dark and shadowy room with a few chairs in a circle. It couldn't be more different.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Why isn't it set at Graham's house?
Fuck knows.
I think that would do a lot to help out the scene if it wasn't set in a white AA meeting room and they didn't all have name badges. If it was he's found these people and invited them round to his, well, that house has been a sort of home base of the era, so I think that would really work.
I think it's the feeling of estrangement that comes from those labels, isn't it? It emphasises they are strangers to each other, even the distance between their chairs in the little circle. And these people, there is not much of a sense of camaraderie or friendship here. There is distance, like, all over that scene.
It was just a great mixture of people there. It was a really beautiful day.
I will also say I may want to recruit you for some work.
To be able to have William Russell as Ian Chesterton, who's there right in the first episode in 1963, and to be able to have him come back in and to be in Jodie's final episode and to really illustrate that idea of the Doctor never leaves you and the Doctor's impact on your life never leaves you, just felt fantastic.
Dan, I've only been back a month, and I gotta say I'm glad I'm not on the verge of being exterminated anymore. But I do miss her.
It was incredibly moving to be part of that, particularly with the Ian Chesterton character. I found that, terribly moving.
It's so great. And again, that they all said yes, and I rang Katie and I rang Bonnie and rang William, and it's just like for them all to say yes, and
it was
William's come in and do this from the first episode of Doctor Who in 1963 to that. Amazing, And we could have, there are obviously some people we couldn't get in because they were off doing other jobs and stuff like that. Just tried to see whether Freema was available, and and obviously Tosin's off in America at the moment, and it's like, but it's really lovely.
Wow.
They don't mention the laptop on the chair.
I think we could have had Freema in that scene, like an RTD companion there. That would have been a head trip. I'm not sure I'd have been ready for that.
Everyone except Rose.
Yeah.
So Gemma Redgrave is talking about how emotional and moving the scene is. Who are we to object to how William Russell was used there?
I think they frame it a lot in terms of the connection with the very first episode and just a sense of having, they talk about him almost like a relic of the first episode. I think just the sense of just having the connection there rather than anything really specific about, Russell or, Ian himself.
Yeah, I know it's overanalyzing how like a featurette was edited or passing remarks in an improvised commentary, but still, Ian's such a character-y character, like much more than succeeding years of the show. I think Ian had a real character. There's a lot to say about Ian. And William Russell as an actor as well, but we were all just talking about he's old and he's here. He was around then and now he's here. It's almost kind of objectifying to me. It's like there's more to this man and this character than the distance where they began to where they are now. But that's how he's kind of used in the episode, is like a relic, which is, I mean, it's what we're criticizing about how a lot of the returning characters are brought back. They're brought back not really on the terms of the senses of their character, which is why we get the bizarre dissonance with how Tegan and Ace are used. And it's why we get that kind of vacuousness with how Ian is used, which is just like, he's old.
Yeah, it's the Guinness World Recordification of bringing characters back.
Yes, that's good. Yeah, I think that general sense that just the show having this much history and having people who are this old associated with it and having gone on for this long, it's sort of treated like a very terribly interesting virtue unto itself, which is how you get scenes like Have a Blast of This Matrix in Timeless Children being the only thing the Doctor does in that story, getting the archive clips.
And this isn't why people get attached to characters, and I don't think actors, like, in the first place. Like, I don't like Ian because this was a man who was on a bit of TV in 1963. No one likes Ian for that reason. They like Ian because of his character and because of the performance, and that's not here so much. It's just William Russell saying a couple of ropey lines, and then everyone's just oohing and ahhing over, he's so old, guys, and he's back. And obviously they all love him, and they all love Ian, and they all love William Russell. I completely believe that. I just think this was a kind of thin usage of him, which is a shame because there's a great character to serve there, and there's a great actor to serve there.
I think there's just a lot of unspoken loss. I think, things that we're treasuring from a very long time ago in the series, it's been a long time. Things like that just sort of, they go away. You can't preserve the past in some perfect form. So, and I think if you don't kind of acknowledge that things, you can't really do that perfect nostalgia, then you just get kind of these hollow reprisals where things are like just the same as they were. Ace is still wearing her jacket. There's something empty about it.
Things can't be the way they were. Hollow reprisals. You're judging the 60th before you've even seen it, Gig.
Wow. Oh my God. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I've sworn not to judge RTD too early.
And you always know when you're playing the Doctor, you're going to read your regen.
Gonna take him one last sunrise.
And it's beautiful and it's sad.
Of course she's okay. She's the Doctor.
But it's everything you want it to be and more. Now I've seen it, now I've read it, and now I know there's no avoiding it. I've got 2 more days before I shoot it. I think it'll be one of those things where when I see the other Doctors tomorrow, it's one of them things where, weirdly, I don't know what it's like yet, but only those people know what this is like. And I think the fans always deserve this reburst of energy. So whoever comes in and plays the Doctor, that's what is necessary, and people play it and they leave it, but it doesn't make it any, even though you know that is a part of your job. And it's a part of every part you ever play, but there's just something so grief-ridden when it comes to this particular role. And I think until I've done it, I can't kind of imagine what it'll feel like.
There's that fascinating telos of the 13 to 14 transition, isn't it? All this talk of every role, but especially the Doctor role, is ridden with grief because when when you leave it, it's gone and you have to mourn it, and then you're part of the rest of the gang who can never touch it again, but that's the experience. And then there's the excitement of the new surge of energy from the new actor taking the part. I just love the dramatic irony of her saying that 2 days before Regeneration, and and David Tennant comes back.
Yeah, she had no idea that it was going to be fucking 10 and popping up after her again. My God, it really puts the kibosh on so much sort of fan wisdom about like the part and the show and the role. Yeah. It's all just completely been upended. It's kind of great.
Yeah, I guess that's all to say. Just beautiful. I mean, we're not laughing at Jodie here. We're laughing at the whole situation. Like, she didn't deserve to have that kind of odd experience of, oh, someone is replaced. I mean, Chibnall had the exact same thing, didn't he? It wasn't the new guy is replacing you. It's that, oh, the old guy is replacing you. Jodie got the same thing. And of course, Jodie's mates with Tennant. and Chibnall's mates with RTD. I don't think there's any bad blood here, but it just casts all the wisdom fans and people behind the show talk about the transitions between eras and things. It just casts it all in a very funny light because of how odd 13 to 14 and Chibnall to RTD 2 is.
Well, yeah, I'm glad Jodie at least got to regenerate, you know, right, do a scene where she explodes into a burst of flame or whatever, you know, and the show didn't get, like, abruptly cut off, or she didn't get, like, Colin Bakered with, like, Tennant in a wig or anything like that. Like, it's a relief the show survived long enough she got that, at least.
Yeah, I wonder what RTD would have said about Tennant in a wig.
What?
My last line. I hope I got it right, but I did love my last line. I hope I said it exactly as I was supposed to.
We flipped it around in the edit, actually, because it was originally in the script. It was, I want to know what's next was last.
Yeah.
And then it was Becky Trotman, the two people who edited this episode, just went, tag, your it is better. And I was like, you're right. And it's so more you as a final line.
I really respect that that Chris has made sure that everyone knows that not just that it was an editor's decision, but it's making sure that Becky's name is being said alongside, because it is a really good creative decision. The edited version is much, much better. And I like that the credit's going to the right person there.
I also think that's some good, healthy creativity in editing there, because it's like they did film the whole scene as scripted and everything. It's not like they're scrambling, you know, in the edit to try and make something work. It's they've filmed it all as it was scripted. They've got all that, and then they're just deciding, oh, there's a better way we can do it by rearranging it. That's very different from like a Sea Devil-esque situation of what the fuck have we got here? How do we make anything out of this? So yeah, and that's, you know, editing is the third time you get to create the story. And so I think, yeah, that all works well, that they changed it there.
I think you can see, if you're looking closely and you know what you're looking for, you can see the seams of the dialogue being rearranged. Like, it's not invisible, it's not perfect, but it's a very well edited swapsy. And the footage is good enough as well that, so the camera's really close on the eyes for one of the lines. Yeah. Which covers up the moving around. But it works. It really works. It's a well performed edit.
Yeah, we say it works. But it's that same thing again of the lines don't feel like a setup to a past actor taking on the role at all. But it is what it is. And I actually love abrupt little breaks between eras. Like, I love that this era ends in a way that doesn't actually very neatly go into 14s. I think that's one of the biggest joys of Doctor Who to me, is that it's not a clean, tidy progression of shows into shows. It's the show actually changes. Moffat's show is not RTD's show, and Moffat himself kind of has two distinct shows in his run. That's the variance of the show. That's the interesting thing about the show, is that it's not a big neat progression. It's all a big swirly mess of, you know, breaks and changes and everything. That's what keeps things fresh and interesting. So I think it's very funny, but I like that it's not the cleanest thing in the world, how they transition into each other. It gives you a lot more to talk and think about, I think.
I think there's just big credit to Chibnall to being open to that edit, to that editor's idea, and like the fact that it's a story-led and character-led instinct to have her last line be a character thing, rather than the, oh, let's point ahead to the future of the show, and oh, I bet it's going to be brilliant, because that's a parallel to the first episode, and just that kind of shallow, superficial kind of circularity. I think it's just such a better instinct to have it be a character thing. The fact that he was open to that idea, I think it reflects well on him, you know, maybe more so than some of his writing does. In general, it's in character for him to be really like boosting his, like, the people who worked with him, people who are rising up, people who worked under him. Like, he's been good with that, like, throughout his whole run. So
he's not egotistical at all. No.
The circularity of the original line of brilliant is so shallow as well.
Yeah.
I guess it's optimistic, and Jodie's Doctor is optimistic, I suppose, but it's nothing like as characterful as Taggart, which is lovely.
It reminds me of all those fan edits of, like, they used to be of the 8th Doctor regenerating, now they're of the John Hurt Doctor regenerating, where someone like dubs in a clip of Eccleston saying fantastic, like the Doctor just regenerated and then he said fantastic. That's what Eccleston sometimes said. Like, it's just this complete hollow character said thing they've said before, or they'll say after. So yeah, I'm really glad the brilliant thing didn't happen.
That music.
So this is the first demo that Sagan ever sent to me to be composed on the show. It was this thing, and the first cue he ever did, which is the 13th Doctor's theme. And the last notes of it are his last work on the show.
More circularity. Interesting.
Yeah.
I think that one works. I think that's neat.
Yeah.
Of course, you're going to end with the Doctor's theme. That makes sense. Although Gold usually didn't.
He did some interesting... I love the reprise of the Ackerton music with the 11th Doctor's return. I think that was so inspired, and it's really interesting storytelling just on a musical level about that scene. But yet, just classic regenerating on a Doctor's theme. You know, it works.
Yeah, and it just works as regen music as well. The way that theme is like structured and built, I think I think the musical circularity works in the way that the dialogue circularity wouldn't necessarily have worked at all.
And I think there's something really neat in the dialogue, especially this edited version, really playing down the scene. It's very small, accurate, you know.
I like that. Yeah.
And then the shot is this massive crane. And the music does that nice bridge where it's vocal and it's not massive crashing instrumental, but it's also quite sort of howling, dramatic. Ties together the epic visuals and the small dramatic scale of it quite well. I think it works.
I'm glad they didn't do this because I think it was the right move not to have music in 14's first scene, but it strikes me 13's theme would blend in really neatly into the Doctor Forever. It's like a similar kind of majestic vibe. That would have been pretty amazing to hear Sagan doing a version of that as, you know, 14's clothes melt out of Jodie. That would have been interesting.
It's still a question mark whether we'll ever hear Murray Gold's music again in the show, so we'll have to wait and see.
I'm sure we'll hear it, if not by his hand.
I would really love future composers to pick up on bits of Sagan's music.
Use anything. I say use music from classic, like reference anything.
Yeah.
Any music to reference, I think, is great. There's all this, there's such a wealth of material from classic, from Murray, from Sagan. Use it.
Late Murray Gold starts bringing in some classic Who sounding little motifs and stuff, and I think that's excellent.
It is a true resource when you have like a great amount of music and a huge amount of leitmotifs for something. Like, I think it was so baffling. I know there was a huge bit of discourse when Danny Elfman took over composing duties for the very troubled Justice League film back in 2017, and he talked a big talk about how I'm not using any of that Hans Zimmer junky Excel stuff because Superman's already got a theme. He's got the John Williams one, and I did a great Batman theme. Let's use those. Everyone knows those. And I think he was like trying to say, I've got this great resource of me, so I'm going to reuse me, which I appreciate. I don't think if you're in a series where there's already music for something, it kind of makes sense to keep using the music that's already there, not the music from a totally different version of something. But in Doctor Who, it's all the one story, much more than something like successive reboots of Batman. So music is, I feel like people kind of forget because it's this thing I yap on about a lot, which is something I really hate, this attitude in Doctor Who in that we always want things new and different because that's Doctor Who, and new and different means always doing shallow versions of the same thing instead of ever doing interesting things with the old things. And it's like Sagan is great at blending his motifs, and Murray was also great at blending his motifs. You could imagine Sagan's cyber percussion underneath, some bit of synthy classic Cyberman music or something. There's all sorts of great stuff you could do. There's all this stuff here you can use while creating stuff new and while not creating stuff new. There's just, Doctor Who has so much excellent music there. I wish Sagan had used some of the past music. Like when Captain Jack returned and we just got this random bit of hopeful music. Like, what was that? Use Captain Jack's music. That's the moment is all crafted around, Jack is back, thing I know, this is awesome. So why are we using new music instead of the music we associate with Jack? Like, there's moments I think it makes so much more sense to use old music. So I hope whoever comes next, go for some Sagans, go for some Golds, go for some whatever. There's so much great music here to use.
Yeah, it might be tricky with some of the classic music.
I don't know the whole right situation, but in a perfect world, use anything is my thought.
And now, so we're here recording this DVD commentary and the screen has gone blank in front of us.
Because we're not trusted with the information.
So two of us know what's that. Like, I've seen it. So I'm talking over
what happens.
Somebody being amazing and doing a brilliant thing and a brilliant couple of lines, a brilliant performance.
I know
brilliant
about
bit of writing.
it.
It's
Mandip
delightful.
Has no idea what they're talking about.
You've got to wait.
She's not in a circle yet. Might trust her later.
Yeah. Again, it's not surprising. I would have assumed that Chris and Jodie were in the loop and other people weren't. Interesting that Jodie hadn't actually seen it, had only heard about it from various people.
After filming as well. Like that featurette was 2 days before she filmed it. And this commentary is obviously when the episode's done.
It's the hierarchy, isn't it? I think even of actors to a certain extent. Like some of them are like higher up in the circle of like in the know, and some of them just. I think again because we mentioned it earlier, actors just aren't like integrated in quite the same way that like the showrunner is, for example.
Interesting. Tennant did his first lines himself. Not his first lines.
The teeth line, yeah.
But his first new coming back lines, where I don't think Jodie had an input in hers. It's just you get the sense that different productions privilege the creative input of the actors in their characters slightly differently.
And there's also the fact that Tennant is coming back after having already done years with RTD. Like there is an existing like huge thing there. I mean, there's just so much. I mean, it's unprecedented. It's like it's impossible to find a precedent for.
That's true.
Like it's just so utterly different with the Tennant return.
And Tennant was a super fan as well. I think he felt ownership of the character in a pre-existing... Like, as a fan, he would have felt ownership of the character before even being cast, just because we fans all feel some ownership over the Doctor. So, yeah, I think just a different relationship as well. Our next discussion on commentaries is going to cover just one episode, which is Spyfall Part 2. And we're going to look at courting controversy and writing inspiration and lines that get stepped on, representation, inspiration, controversy. Is there any way you want to set up our listeners for what's to come in our Spyfall 2 examination?
I think expect the unexpected and be prepared for some real surprises.
Yeah. Okay, thank you listeners for listening. Why don't you kick this up a level, and instead of just our commentary on these commentaries, why don't you pitch in with a comment so we can have some commentary on our commentary of the commentaries? I would love for any viewers to go ahead and do that. And thank you very much for listening. Stay tuned for the next 4 Chibnall Era commentary discussions we have coming. The next one, like we've said, is on Spyfall Part 2. And oh boy, it's a really interesting one. Thanks again for listening. Cheers.